session, which is our second material culture related one, which will be on metallurgy and metal artifacts. And our first paper this afternoon will be given by Lavinia Giorgi from the Sapienza Università di Roma, and her paper title is How Many Weapons for the Palace? An Interpretation Proposal for the Use of Kako in the Pylos Linear B tablets. So she is a PhD candidate in Mycenaean philology and archaeology at the Sapienza Università di Roma at the moment. Her PhD research focuses on the acquisition and management methods for bronze used by the Mycenaeans, using an integrated analysis of Linear B tablets with Hittite, Akkadian, and Ugaritic texts on the one hand, and then late Bronze Age Aegean archaeological evidence on the other. Since her BA and MA, she has been interested in Mycenaean philology and Aegean archaeology. Her BA thesis compared Mycenaean and Egyptian land management by examining written sources, and her MA thesis focused on Mycenaean trade and exchange, combining philological and archaeological evidence. So Lavinia, if you could take the stage, please. Just point at me and thank you.
So thank you, Stephanie, for the presentation, and thanks to the organizers for accepting my paper and for making possible this conference. And thank you also to all of you who are here, both in person and remotely, to attending this conference and this presentation. As already said, my PhD research deals with the management and circulation of bronze in the Mycenaean world, primarily through the analysis of the Linear B tablets. And this presentation is closely related to it. Indeed, one of the main purposes of the work I will present to you is to suggest a possible intended use of the metal recorded as Kako, namely chalcos, bronze or copper, in Mycenaean written sources from Pylos. Because I will analyze the Linear B tablets dealing with copper or bronze, another main goal of this presentation will be to better understand the role of the Mycenaean palaces in the management of bronze and bronze industry. Last, assuming that the metal recorded in the Pylos tablets was bronze intended for weaponry, I will propose the war potential of the Pylos kingdom at the end of its life. Given the materiality of the research objective, my work is based on a multidisciplinary approach that combines two different types of data, textual and material, as investigated by Mycenaean philology and Aegean archaeology, respectively. In this presentation, I will begin with an introduction that explains how copper or bronze is recorded on Linear B tablets. The 20 tablets for Pylos that record Kako and gathered in the JN series will be discussed next. Following that, I will describe the archaeological evidence that was used to compare with the textual data. Then I will present the results of data combination and integration, and finally draw conclusions. So let's get started. The metals can be recorded in Linear B tablets using both syllabograms and logograms. Some metal-related tablets record the word kako, which can be read as the Greek word kalkos. The logogram 140, transliterated as AS, the Latin word for metal, also represents this word. Even if the reading of the word kako and its logogram is clear, their meaning is not. Indeed, depending on the context, the word kalkos in classical Greek can refer to either copper or bronze. Moreover, the shape of the logogram, as well as the record context in Linear B, are not helpful in identification. On the one hand, the logogram for Kako is attested in association with the oxide ingot logogram. Since oxide ingots were typically made of copper, the logogram 140 was assumed to mean copper. On the other hand, Kako and the logogram are attested as raw material for making weapons, particularly spearhead and javelin in the tablet from Knossos and this one from Pylos, and as well as part of the chariot tablets. The chariot wheels in this tablet. This evidence allows us to classify Kako and the logogram as bronze. Thus, ambiguity in the meaning of kalkos seems to have existed since the Mycenaean period. However, since one of the Pylos giant series tablets, the written sources I will focus on in this presentation, testifies to the connection between Kako, the logogram 140, and weapons, which is this one, we will now consider Kako to be bronze. So let us now turn our attention to the philological evidence. The Pylos JN series consists of 20 tablets that are divided into two groups. One includes 2 tablets that deal with the delivery of Kako to the palace by some of the most important officials of the kingdom, such as governors of provinces and their deputies. The other 18 tablets, The other 18 tablets, on the other hand, deal with the distribution of Kako by the palace to the Kakewe or smiths. All of these documents are page-shaped, namely rectangular, were discovered in the archive complex of the Pylos Palace, dated to the late Ladi 3B2, and are assigned to the scribalens scribe 2 and 21. In this presentation, I would like to focus on these 18 tablets because they are the best case study for achieving the goals outlined at the start of this talk. These records were created from a toponymic perspective. The place name is indeed the first word recorded, the one in light blue, followed by the records of smiths, kakewe, kalkeis in ancient Greek, which are divided into 2 categories, the kakewe tarasiya ekote and the atarasiyo kakewe. The first were those who received weighted amount of bronze, as you can see from the first paragraph, sorry, the logogram for bronze and the quantities, the measure unit and the quantity. The second are only listed by personal name here, followed by the number 1. Some of the smiths seems to have had some connection to the religious sector because they are further defined Potiniyaweyo, an adjective that means pertaining to Potnia, one of the most important deities in the Mycenaean pantheon. Some smiths may have a slave, sorry. No, it doesn't, it's not working, okay. These are the Kakewe Potiniyaweyo. And here we have slaves, doero, douloi in ancient Greek. And in some cases, Quasireu, Basileus oversaw the work of Kakewe Tarasiya Ekote. These were the smiths who worked according to the Tarasiya work performance, which was supposed to consist of an institution, such as the palace, supplying a certain amount of raw material to craftsmen, in this case smiths, who would then undertake to return the finished objects in the same number as what they had received from the central institution. This interpretation states that the JN series would demonstrate the phase of distribution of raw material by the palace in amounts ranging from 1.5 kilos expressed by M1 and 2 and M12 12 kilos for an average of 3.5 kilograms each, even though the assignments appear irregular. At the end of some paragraphs that list weighted bronze allocations to smiths employing according to the Tarasiya system, you may occasionally find the total Kako delivered as here, to so the Kako, so much kalkos, so bronze. Scholars were able to calculate the total amount of metal recorded in the JN series thanks to the weighted bronze record. The results vary between studies and on the basis of text examined, ranging from 600 to over 800 kilos. All of these values are less than the total amount of weighted material recorded in another tablet that may be associated with the JN series. I'm referring to JA 749, which records literally all of it, Tosupa, 1,046 kilograms. The tablet does not record the type of weighted material, but it has been assumed that it was the bronze assigned to the smiths recorded in the JN series. Some elements, such as the same fine spot and the same scuba land, scribe 2, support the relationship between JA 749 and the JN series so far analyzed. In general, as for the JN series, we can notice that the 18 JN series tablets under investigation provide quantitative information on the metal, but neither the intended use nor the form in which it was distributed. So we can ask, what was the purpose of this bronze? The bronze that the palace assigned to the Kakewe, in accordance with the Tarasiya system, may have been used to make weapons. Indeed, on the one hand, JN 829, the only tablet in the JN series that records bronze objects to be produced, refers to spearhead and javelin. You can see, Kako bronze for points for making javelins and spears. For making points for javelin and spears. And on the other hand, many tablets from other palaces, particularly Knossos, but also Tiryns and Agios Vasilios, record weapons emphasizing the involvement of Mycenaean centers in the management of war industry, as you can see on the slide, and the numerous logograms representing weapons. On this basis, I chose some offensive and defensive weapons that the palace could have commissioned to smiths in order to determine how many weapons could be produced using the bronze noted in the giant series. Arrows, javelins, spears, swords, and daggers were offensive weapons, while armors and helmets were defensive. The shield and the chariot were not considered because, despite being made of bronze parts, calculating the amount of alloy required for their manufacture is difficult, or is more difficult at least. The weapons weights were calculated using published archaeological data with material evidence dating to the late Helladic 3 AB, chosen because it is contemporaneous with or just before the period to which the Pylos tablets are dated. As for the arrowheads, the weight between 4 and 6 grams has been detected on the basis of the weight of some specimens, especially found in Messenia, in the Palace of Pylos and in the Nicoria side, dated to the late Helladic 3B. In the picture, you can see also the arrowheads from the Arsenal of Thebes, dated to the same period. Material specimens such as a javelin head weighing 103 grams and discovered during the excavation of the late Helladic 3 BC levels of the Epidaurus, and another found in the Acropolis of Mycenae weighing 100 grams and dated to the same period, were used to calculate the average javelin weight of 100 grams. According to the discoveries like a spearhead from Dendra from the early 14th century BC that weighed 237 grams, and 2 spearheads discovered in the chamber tomb 47 at Mycenae from the 14th to the 13th century BC that weighed 210 and 171 grams respectively, the spearheads appear to have an average weight of 200 grams. As for the swords, type C, D, E, F, G were taken into consideration based on the typology of the Aegean swords developed by Sanders, because they were likely the most common during the late Helladic 3 AB. However, due to a lack of information regarding their weight, both the weights provided by experimental archaeology research and estimates presented in a study by Akulin have been considered. Based on this data, an average of 400 grams was calculated. According to the Akrotiri findings, the daggers weighed between 173 and 303 grams and had an average weight of 250 grams. This evidence is chronologically earlier, but apparently it is the closest to the Mycenaean period of which the weight is published, as far as I could find. The type of helmet considered was one made of bronze plates, of course, and weighing around 700 grams, which corresponded to the weight of bronze helmet of Knossos, which was equivalent to 708 grams, and was consistent with the 695 grams provided by Ventris and Chadwick in documents. At the end, the panoply of Dendra was used as a model for the armor, with the revised estimated weight of 15 kilograms accepted instead of a previous 30 kilograms. This specimen is chronologically earlier, 15th century BC, than the Pylos tablets, and contains fewer bronze plaques, 12, than those that make up the armor described in some others Pylos tablets, the SH series, which count 30 or 34 plaques for each armor. But the shape of the Dendra armor resembles the logogram 163, which is used to identify the armor recorded in the Pylos SH series. It was therefore thought reasonable to use the weight of the Dendra armor as a reference model. So I used this weight to calculate how many weapons could be produced with the bronze recorded in the JN series. To check for a match between specific bronze quantity and specific types of weapons, each IS value, so the values of Kalkos, the bronze, was divided by the weight of each weapon selected. The greater quantity of bronze would have obviously served to produce a greater number of weapons, ensuring the armament of a greater number of soldiers, whether archers, lancers, or swordmen, as you can imagine. However, even the smallest amount of metal, M1 and 2, or 1.5 kilos, could have been used to make all of the selected weapons. Indeed, M1 and 2 would be used to produce between 250 and 375 arrows. which could equip between 8 and 12 archers taking 30 arrows per quiver, or 15 javelins or 7 or 8 spears that could arm 7 or 8 soldiers, or 4 swords or 6 daggers or 2 helmets, as you can see in the first line of the table. Furthermore, although 1.5 kilos of kako is not enough to produce a Denda type of suit of armor, the metal may have been used to create some elements of the panoply, such as large and small plates, or pawota, as recorded in the linear B tablet as well, the gorget, maybe cuero, another word in the linear B tablet, shoulder straps or cheek pieces, ear flaps, as well as the others recorded in the linear B tablet. This would demonstrate that M1 and 2 was not as small as previously thought. To have a global view of the entire bronze production capacity assigned to the Kakewe in the JN series, the records of individual quantities were taken into account, and the amount of each type of weapon potentially produced with each standard quantity of bronze delivered to the smiths considered was calculated across all occurrences indicated in this column. In this way, the production of weapons under the palace control may have been aimed at compensating for the lack of the soldiers' armament in the individual parts, so weapons by weapons. However, the palatial war industry could also have responded to the need to provide soldiers with all the necessary equipment. Therefore, I estimated the number of potentially armed infantry by dividing both the individual bronze delivery amounts to the smiths and the total weight provided by JA 749 for the estimated weight of a soldier's armament. Infantry armament, reconstructed primarily through iconography, would include a sword, a spear or 2 javelins, a bronze helmet or a bronze tusk helmet, and a shield. Excluding the shield for the reasons that we said before, and considering the use of the bronze helmet, the total weight of a light armament would be 1.2, 1.3 kilograms, depending on whether the dagger or the sword is used. The result provided by JA 749 is especially significant because the number of armaments is consistent with the amount of people, approximately 850 individuals, recorded in the 5 tablets from Pylos, the so-called Oka series. And you can see the number here. The Oka tablets are 5-page shaped documents found in archive complex dated to the late Helladic 3B2 and written by Scribe 1. They record groups of men organized in Oka, Orkai, which can be considered as military troops. Indeed, groups of recorded men were stationed along the Messenian coast to protect the kingdom of Pylos. The men recorded in the Oka series are divided into groups that range in size from 10 to 110 people, always in multiples of 10, and sometimes named by a specific name, as you can see on the right side of the slide, such as Surupiyayo, Keaki Deiwas, and so on. And then the total number of the men assigned to each troop is indicated by the numbers that follow the names. That being said, I could first calculate how many soldiers could be armed with basic infantry armament based on the number of weapons that could have been produced using the individual quantities of bronze assigned to the smith of the JN series. Then I compared the number of soldiers to the number of men recorded in the so-called Oka series to make a prediction about the Pylos war potential. Since some of the values exactly match, as you can see from the red numbers, it can be assumed that at least some of the individual's amount of bronze given to smiths, if used to produce only one type of weapon, could arm groups of men numerically corresponding to those who probably constituted military troops in the kingdom of Pylos. Furthermore, if we assume that the bronze of the JN series was used to produce the complete infantry armament, other correspondences can be highlighted. The red values represent exact matches, whereas the pink values represent a range that include the number of men in the Oka groups. Therefore, it can be assumed that the standard bronze quantity of the JN series could have also produced full armaments in numbers comparable to some of the Pylos, possibly military troops. Moreover, if we consider the various troops that constitute the Oka groups, we can first calculate how many weapons would have been required to arm the troops. Second, we can compare the results to the quantity of bronze assigned to the smiths in the JN series to notice if there are any possible coincidences that indicate whether the kako recorded in the JN series was used to produce weapons for the soldiers of Pylos. As you can see, if we accept the validity of these estimates, of course, there are some exact matches that can help to support the hypothesis. Of course, I'm not claiming that the bronze recorded in the JN series was used to make weapons specifically for soldiers serving in the Oka, but I'm saying that it was enough, it could be enough to make at least part of the armament for a number of men corresponding to those of possible military, Mycenaean military troops. So, in conclusions, I believe that it is not likely that the bronze of the JN series was intended to produce weapons. If this is the case, on the one hand, the linear B documents examined as a product of the palatial administration would testify to the interest of the Mycenaean palaces in the war industry due to its strategic role in the exercise of power. On the other hand, the possible use of the JN series bronze in the war industry could strengthen the military interpretation of the Oka series, giving us a better understanding of the military potential of the Pylos kingdom. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lavinia, for tackling what is actually a very complicated subject. So I would like to invite our next speaker up to the podium now, who is Wojciech Jenerałek, comes from the Adam Mickiewicz University at Poznan, and he will be talking to us on interdisciplinary research on gold mining at the Amarala archaeological site in northern Greece, the final result. And Wojciech holds a MA in Mediterranean archaeology and is currently at the final stage of his PhD thesis. He's a graduate of the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan, and since 2021, he has been a curator of the Ancient Art Gallery at the National Museum in Poznan. In 2022, he completed a long-term gold mining research project at the Amarala archaeological site in northern Greece, which was funded through a diamond grant. So please, if you come up and I'll arrange your...
Okay. Hello, everyone. You must know that the public speeches are extremely stressful for me, so sorry about that, and maybe because of that. Thank you for the presentation. Yes, currently I serve as a curator of ancient art gallery at the National Museum in Poznań, and maybe this is a good occasion to invite all of you because we have a bit of Aegean pottery from Knossos in our museum, also from Troy, from Schliemann excavation. Maybe it will be a topic for the next convention. But let's start. Over past few years as a student and then a PhD candidate, at the Department of Archaeology at Adam Mickiewicz University, I have been conducted a project funded by the Ministry of Education and Science. And as you can see, the title of the grant and of the project is interdisciplinary research on gold mining at the Amarala archaeological site in North Greece. This is the short version of the title. And in next few minutes, I will have the pleasure to share with you what we have discovered. Start from the map, maybe. So Amarala is located on the northern slopes of Antemus River Valley in the northern Greece, east of Thessaloniki, about 40 kilometers from the city, more or less in this place. Also close to the Fortiatis, the highest peak in the valley. The name Amarala was mentioned for the first time probably in the publication of Gramenos in 1997. And in fact, I'm not sure what does it mean exactly. I really don't know what is the meaning of the name Amarala, because it's probably not the Greek name. It's also not the Turkish name. It's also not the local name, because the local people from the village Peristera, which is very close to the archaeological site, call this place Astimomilos. It means the silver mill. What is interesting if we are thinking about the gold mine. Okay, and the geological map of the valley. The site is located on alluvial gold deposit identified by Professor Michalis Vaveridis, great geologist from Thessaloniki. This is first thing, and the second, there is really huge rock debris present on the site, which can be related to the gold mining. Because of that, during the ABAP project, Antemus Valley Archaeological Project, it was a project focused on Bronze Age settlement in the valley. We made a decision to start a new project to get some new information about Amalara, about possible gold mining technology, to know gold mining technology, chronology of the gold mining, and to know better the settlement process associated with gold mining. To achieve this goal, we made surface research, geological mapping, and an analysis of the heavy mineral composition of the alluvial deposit of Amalara. As you can see, probably Amalara is one of the most beautiful places in Greece, in my opinion, of course. You can disagree with it, but you will understand. And this is the everyday road to the site. So every day in Amalara is an adventure. So starting from the mineralogical analysis, it was probably one of our biggest mistakes. You can ask why. To make a very long story short, because of the time, we prepare 6 samples from 10 kilograms per the sample, 10 kilograms of the river sediments. Then we prepare concentrates of the heavy minerals, and then analyze the samples under an optical microscope, as you can see here, and also electron microscope, but we didn't find any gold. It was sad information, but as I told you before, we made some mistakes. First, the samples were probably too small, because it was only 60 kilograms of the sediments. And the second mistake, we were looking for a gold in the surface deposit. We should looking for a gold a bit much deeper, because even in the ancient times, they were digging much deeper. But we were a bit more lucky during surface research, because we had some experience from the ABAP project. So settlement at the Amalara site began in the early Bronze Age and took form of the tumba, as we can see in number 1 here, also on the photo. The tumba in North Greece is an artificial moat resulting from the long-term settlement. The name could be tricky because it's like a grave, but not it's settlement in North Greece. The diameter of the tumba is more or less 60 meters, and its height is around 10 meters. So compared to other similar Bronze Age certain settlements in Antemus Valley to others Tumba. Amalara is one of the smallest one. And also Amalara is situated in very difficult to access mountain landscape, what is a bit strange if you are thinking about settlement patterns in Antemus Valley. And also Amalara is invisible to other settlements from the Bronze Age in the Antemus Valley. One of the reason to locate it, the tumba in this place could be maybe extraction of the gold from alluvial deposits, but of course extraction of the gold from the alluvial deposits in the small scale leave any traces in the landscape, and the tools used for that purpose were made probably from organic materials, so it's really hard to say, but from the late Neolithic, from the northern Greece, you have examples of gold working, gold artifacts, maybe from the local deposits, and a little bit later, if we are thinking about Mycenaean gold artifacts, I think we are not 100% sure about the origin of the gold. The interesting thing that on the top of Amalara, during surface research, we found Mycenaean pottery from the late Helladic 3C. It is not very often in Antemus Valley. So another justification, let's say, for the localization of the tumba would be potential mountain passage between Antemus and Mygdonia Basin. It's just a good place to this road. In the early Iron Age, from the Archaic period, the settlement from the Tumba Amalara moved to the Trapeza. This is typical characteristic form for the Iron Age settlement in this region, and also to the even bigger, about 6 hectares plateau located here. So during the surface research, we found pottery from the Archaic period and classical and until the Byzantine period. So there was a really long-term permanent settlement in this place. And also we can suppose that in the early Iron Age, the number of citizens of Amalara really increased. But also number 4. This is the Byzantine building located more or less 700 meters north of the tumba. After surface research, we can dating this building at the 6th century. And on the opposite side on this building, last year we found even bigger settlement in this part on the opposite side of the stream. where settlement starts probably in the same time, in the 6th century. And this gray part of the map is the rock debris, probably remains of the gold mining. So we have settlement very close to the to these rocks, to this rock debris. So we can suppose that it could be something like a village for the workers and administration building on the another side. You must to keep in mind that in the same time, in Byzantine period, the settlement on the Trapeza and Plateau still exist. So in the 6th century, we have another increase of the population. Here we have Piotr Zerman from yesterday presentation, working in this new Byzantine, let's say, village for workers. Around the village, we found something like the wall, not all around, but just in this this part. But we must remember that it was only surface research. So something about remains of the gold mining, because maybe it will be the most interesting. We can divide these remains of gold mining into two categories. The first is infrastructure. The second one is the rock debris, let's say the trash after the gold mining. On the left side, we have hydrological network of the Amalara. Is rich enough to mining the gold, and there we have a canal between two streams, probably made in the 6th century, and another infrastructure could be connected to the gold mining is the canal, like 26 meters of canal here, and reservoir with two levels and capacity of more than 500 cubic meters. And very small structure we have on the Roman gold mines, for example, in La Besta in North Italy, in Las Cavernas in Spain, and in Las Medulas, the biggest Roman mine in Spain, also in north of Spain. But what about this rock debris? After making a documentation of all the rock debris, you can say that our area occupied by the rocks is more or less 100,000 square meters. It's quite big. All of them are located very close to the river or to the streams. So as I told you before, it is very important to wash the alluvial sediments, and we have any regular shapes, and there is also many different sizes of this rock debris, and very similar structures we have in the other Roman mine, La Besta, in North Italy, a bit bigger than Amallara, and Amallara is also probably a bit older because okay, it's time to make a conclusion. We can be sure that gold mining that gold was mining in the Amallara from the beginning of the settlement, from the early Bronze Age, but I think it could be possible. We have significant increase of the population in the early Iron Age, and the second increase of population in the 6th century, and new settlement in 6th century. So I think that we can dating this rock debris. This reminds for the gold mining from the Byzantine times, and it was very short version, but it was 20 minutes. So I hope to talk with you in the question or after the this session. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Wojciech, for providing a very long-term overview of this particular site and for sharing your final results for us. And now we are joined online by Giorgia di Lorenzo from the Italian Archaeological School at Athens and the University L'Orientale of Naples. And she will be talking to us on an eye single blade bronze axe from Achaea and the possible trading circuits from Italy, Central Europe and Greece between the last phases of Mycenaean palaces and the First Iron Age. So Giorgia's research field concerns protohistory in Europe with particular reference to the early Iron Age in Italy and in the Aegean. In the Italian context, her research aims above all to analyze the process of territorial transformation and the funerary ideology of the Villanovan culture in comparison to other contemporary Italic cultures such as Latin Vetus and Fossa culture. In her postgraduate degree, she continued with a thesis in archaeology and history of Greek art. And on this occasion, her interest turned to the socio-political transformations that took place between the fall of the Mycenaean palaces and the so-called Dark Age, updating evidence from the Argolid. More recently, she is focusing on the relationship and context between Italy and Central Europe with the Aegean through the metallurgical Koine, with particular reference to Northern and Western Greece. So I can see, Giorgia, that you've managed to share.
Can you hear me and see me?
We can see your presentation and we can hear you fine. So please go ahead.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for your presentation, brilliant presentation. I'm very glad to participate to this interesting conference. I would like to thank the organizers for accepting my proposal and for the important work of the Warsaw University and for the Polish Archaeological Institute at Athens more recently. The single blade axe from which this contribution starts struck my interest for its various implications and for the possible new typological and even contextual readings that can be proposed, and is a part of a broader work in progress on the metallurgical Koine of Western and Northwestern Greece. The interaction between Aegean and Central Mediterranean begin in the early Middle Bronze Age. Mycenaean pottery begins to be found in the Aeolian Island, in the Gulf of Naples, and then in southeast of a peninsula in Lazio and Po Valley up to the end of late Atlantic 3C, also with the presence of craftsmen and local imitation. At the end of the late Helladic 3C, there is a contraction of Mycenaean evidence, but not in Apulia, for example, in Roccavecchia. Likewise, the archaeological evidence indicates the presence of objects and perhaps of an alloctonous people in Mycenaean area, at least since late Helladic 3B, as demonstrated by the so-called barbarian ware, with the comparison in Italy, but also in the Adriatic Balkan area, by the introduction of the new Italic Central European typology of nauseous words, as attested by the ivory plaques of the handle of a specimen from Mycenae, but also by sporadic evidence of a local new production, as evidenced by the well-known soft stone molds from the house of the oil merchant of Mycenae. The presence of alloctonous objects and also a local production continues, if not intensifies, with the fall of the palaces in late Helladic 3C, as also shown by another soft stone mold from the house to the west of the first square of Festos, which can be roughly placed in advance of late Minoan. For both axes, the closest comparison are given by the example of Peschiera type of Surbo Horde by the evidence of Scoglio del Tonno both in Apulia and Lipari. These evidences introduce the question and more recently the possibility of tracing an alloctonous presence in the Aegean. Since the 1970s, in the archaeological literature, this term meant the diffusion, after the fall of Mycenaean palaces, of common types of objects from Europe to Eastern Aegean. In a very synthetic way, today we can distinguish two trends. The first one tries to follow the network of commercial exchanges and the circulation of the shared models, a word system perspective, according to Susan Sherratt, based on a particular symbolic and ideological meaning. The second one, instead, very intriguing but difficult, tends to look behind the material culture for possible indication of ethnic identities, including the possibility of a movement of people as craftsmen, pirates, mercenaries, and colonizers. Precisely to the mercenaries, carriers of non-Aegean military technology with nauseous word, first hired by the palatial centers, then free to move, looked at later studies. For sure, an exclusively typological investigation is limited, just as archaeometric analysis need a contextual approach. We need to keep in mind some remarks. In case of an import, the origin of the metal doesn't necessarily mean the origin of the object. In case of a local production inspired by an alloctonous model, we can have an appropriation and a reworking with sometimes hybrid solution. The possibility of the spread in a large scale of functional types, for example, spearheads. The possibility of the integration of the alloctonous element and/or the possibility of the absence of a formal barrier for some social categories. The metals of the Koine after the are widespread through the Aegean, including the central places of the palatial powers such as Argolis, but are mainly concentrated in so-called peripheries. In this case, I will consider Achaia, Elis, and Northern Arcadia as a single geographical sector. It was able to better support the crumbling of a central power, keeping alive a capillary control of a territory, as evidenced by the persistence of most of the settlements after late Helladic 3B, and managing to build a new socio-political organization open to the contacts with the Western Mediterranean through the Corinth Gulf Gate. Around the late Helladic 3B, some sign of destruction have been found in Dyme, Cato-Achaia area, Anos-Icenia and Agia Kirakia in Pagona, both in Patras area, but the reconstruction is precocious, already in final stages of a late Helladic 3B, and a period of prosperity followed, so much so that for Achaia, the post-palatial period can be considered as a golden age, above all for the area of Patras, where a continuity of use of the previous chamber tombs can be observed. They are well known, the more than 20 examples of a nauseous word, concentrated above all in necropolis around Patras, Italic Central European typology used for trusting and for slashing too, which joins the Mycenaean ones, emblem of the circulation of the new model of war tactics, or maybe a foreign people, which characterize some emerging burials. Among others, we mention briefly some spearheads with a cast socket, one peschiera type dagger, 2 couple of greaves, 9 knives of many Italian types, 1 scoglio del tonno type reason, 4 pins above all of wheel type lead Italic inspiration, some finger rings with double opposite spirals of Northern Balkanic inspiration, some violin bow, leaf bow, and arched fibula that will be better analyzed in the future. Let's talk about the axe in question. It's a single blade with a profiled heel. Handwritten label affixed to the object reads, an axe head. The neck bears a yoke-like mark on one side and maybe a cross on the other side. Northern Peloponnese, Mrs. Walter K. Foster, 1904. According to Bosanquet, who was the first to publish it, this axe was part of a hoard of 5 single axes that were brought to one of the smaller antiquity shops in Athens around 1903, which were found by a peasant in a Patras district. 4 were plain straight-sided implements with large elliptical aft holes. The 5th, this, the best of the bunch, was brought by Mrs. Foster, who gave it to Cambridge Archaeological Museum. Of the 4, one is in a private collection in England. The others lay for a long time in the shop and may now be anywhere. Accession Register notes, an axe with the same marks in relief on either side is in the British Museum and was brought at Pozzuoli in company. So the only comparison reported so far is with this specimen of Campania. If not possible to reconstruct the context indicated by Bosanquet that it was a hoard, its possible presence would increase the number with respect to those well known, and would add the existence of this type of context also in Achaia. On the axe of British Museum probably purchased on antique market at Pozzuoli, there could be a lot of speculation, but relating it to our specimen as an indication of a Campanian origin seems to be simplistic. Along the trajectory Achaia, Gulf, and Corinth, Peninsula, our axe finds a more precise comparison with the Manduria type, with a sharp-edged blade in a slimmer version, with which it shares a sign engraved on the shoulder. The specimen comes from Renzano hoard, an interesting context datable to the 10th century, which brings together different types of high single-blade axes, characteristics above all of the Salento Peninsula. For sure, the acquisition and localization of the single-blade axe of Northern Peloponnese remain obscure in many ways. However, a more precise typological attribution and geographical derivation allow us to follow those movements and contacts between the Western Mediterranean and the Aegean up to the end of Final Bronze Age. In this, the Adriatic side, with the Otranto way, played a fundamental role, as demonstrated by many others allogenous objects. The multisemantic nature of the axe since the Minoan-Mycenaean period makes it one of the main functional and symbolic objects of the cultural heritage of the pre-protohistoric reality of the Mediterranean basin. Regarding the hoards between late Helladic 3b and 3c in the mainland, in the phenomenon of the accumulation of assets and also a mirror of the local production system in relation to the resources of the landscape, and also a mirror of a local production of the nature of the centers, sorry, the most widespread type is a Cretan Mycenaean double axe. We can remember 18 species. Okay, in the funerary context, okay, from here?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Okay, we mentioned the 20 examples from the tribute tombs in Mycenae with an interesting tool, chisel or hammer of a European Balkan type and 2 bronze tribute cauldron, buried in a settlement and productive area after the late Helladic 3B2, connected either to elitist metallurgists still linked to the pyramid of a power of the palatial system, or, and this hypothesis would be the most suggestive, to those first new chiefs who are emerging in a new panorama, precisely in the late Helladic 3C, whose power is linked to own production capacity, above all of metals, and the possibility for linking the community to itself through the management and offer of meals and forms of banquet. An interesting element is the origin of the copper of the tool in his hand from the Lavrian basin, to indicate a probable Aegean production of an unlocked model. The amount of axes and metal ores of Mycenae is followed only by Epirus, expressing a very long, strong local characterization. The territory is occupied in a capillary way by small settlement, where the main Mycenaean center is Ephira on Glikis Limin with the Tolos of Kiperi. We can analyze the Katamachi and Stephanie Prefesa hoard places in a strategic points around the Artas Gulf. The first one shows an interesting wall of 5 double axes and a chisel and hammer, both of a Central European type. Meantime, Stephanie hoard carries an equal number of double axes of the Helladic type and of the Hermoneschieron type. This type is influenced by the Cretan Mycenaean ones, but develop a hybrid and original Balkan solution. Apart from sporadic discoveries in the Aegean, the type is concentrated between Croatia, Serbia, and between Epirus, Ionian Island, and Acarnania. For both contexts, many specimens show signs of wear and breakage that made them no longer functional. In the ores, the function of the objects, in the case of Epirot ones related to the wooden works and also to metallurgy, often clearly no longer functional, gives them a meaning of exchange value in interconnected regional areas that share shapes and symbols, and in the probable movement of metallurgists and merchants, and a precise use and knowledge of the territory. Finally, the axis of Dodona broadened the known typology and the areas of the origin of the offerings kept in this ancient cult center. To the Helladic Creto-Mycenaean type represented by the least 6 specimens, 2 double axes of the Hermoneschieron type, one or Kilindir Begunci, whose production between late Helladic 3B and 3C is localized above all in central Macedonia and Bulgaria, and 2 double axes belonging to the Mat Glasinach culture of Balkan early Iron Age. For the single age axis, apart the circa 40 Tranion axis, I briefly can analyze 2 types. The first one is a cast bronze on the right up with a hollow cylindrical socket with a plastic rings for mounting it on a wooden shaft. It has on one hand a carved discoid butt and on the other maybe the blaze is lost. According to the classification of Ulpe, is the Drajna type of the beginning of final Bronze Age, to be brought back to the area of the Central Carpathian and probably used as a weapon, or according to Klitsas, if we imagine to broken termination ending in a spiral, like some specimen from Romania, Moldavia, and from Uluburum shipwreck, perhaps an insignia of power. The last one down on the right, is a part of the blade of probably winged axe of Italian type. The shape of the blade and the peculiarity of having an engraved line along the edges could be part of the Ardea type, widely spread from the mid-8th century from the north, Bologna Horde, to the south, Cuma and Polizzello in Sicily, with a production center located in Lazio, according to Carancini. If this were the case, apart from the winged axis known from the mold of Mycenae and Festos, a similar type was unknown so far for a later horizon, which now belongs to the colonial period with different implications. To sum up, for the axe from Peloponnese in the Cambridge Museum, it could be possible to add a new horde and confirm the link between Achaia, Corinth Gulf, and Otranto, South Apulia, up to 10th century. The axe is an interesting and multifunctional archaeological marker connected with the local production system, expressed also through the phenomenon of hordes. This object takes part into the socio-political reorganization and empowered dynamics of prominent metallurgists, or maybe a new prominent figure, not only warriors, as the Tripos tomb could demonstrate. In Epirus, the typology of the ores shows an identity material culture that looks precisely at different areas. These ores could be owned and kept in strategic places by itinerant metallurgists and merchants. It seems probable their standardized economic value on a large scale, as has been demonstrated in Italy for the pickaxe loaves or other metals of long-distance circuits. Last but not least, the rule of sanctuaries of ancient traditions such as that of Dodona, later those Panhellenic, as a territorial aggregation element and place of attraction for people and objects from vast area. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lavinia. Thank you for stopping sharing your screen. And sorry, not Lavinia, I'm going mad. Giorgia, thank you very much for your presentation. And yes, thank you for stopping sharing your screen. So now I'm going to invite Lavinia up. You can see where my train of thought was going in order to open up the discussion. So please, Lavinia, and if anyone has any questions for her.
Hello, I have a question. So first of all, thank you for your presentation. And I was wondering whether in any tablets that you have seen, you have found kako in contexts other than weapons, like for example, jewelry.
For example, sorry?
For example, jewelry.
Not really. We found just in relation with weapons and in as like decoration for example, for the chariot wheels, but not for jewelry. No, just yes, in as and like for yes, for making like in relation with a spirit, as I show you, but there is no, it's really rare to find the association between the metal and the indication of metal and the object, which was made of the bronze. So there are just a few examples and that you can find. Yeah, so.
Thank you very much for this magnificent presentation. I find the ambiguity of the term chalkos covering copper and bronze really strange, especially in the context of the Tarasia system. We know that the oxide ingots consisted of copper, but they needed bronze, so they must have added tin.
Yeah.
So how did tin come in? Did the palace give the kakeve copper and tin together, which is rather unlikely, or how did they produce bronze at the end?
This is a very good question, and because as far as we know from the linear B tablets, there is just one record of probably tin that comes from Crete, from Knossos, and this weighted, just the registration of weighted tin, and we don't have records tablets which record distribution of tin to smiths, as well as we have for probably bronze, and even for copper and for oxide ingots, we have just few tablets that come from Knossos, as well as tin, but until now it's difficult to reconstruct the how I mean, at least just using the linear B tablets, how the palace could acquire the copper and tin, and then I mean, could distribute the metal, the raw materials, in order to make bronze. The possibility to this like lack of information is that they could use, especially at the end of the palace of the Mycenaean period, they could use mostly bronze, recycled bronze, instead of make like the alloy, and this could be like an option to like explain why we have this lack of information. But yes, I mean, the evidence from the tablets are very few. I mean, and they probably are, they are not, I mean, they're not enough to explain or to reconstruct until now the process of how the palace could import even copper and especially tin. But I mean, one idea that I have, but it's really like a suggestion, and that could be also that the Tarasiya system could explain like the, or could be a way to, I mean, a way how the palace could actually distribute the copper and tin in order to make bronze, because it's a system in which you have like exact amounts of weight material that the palace distributed to workmen, to craftsmen, and then they have to give back the final objects. And these final objects could also be like the bronze, the alloy, but it's just really a suggestion, and there is no proof to, or nothing to prove it until now.
Thank you.
May come in very quickly on that. I think one of the most important things to remember is that the linear B tablets were being written by the scribes for the scribes. So they weren't particularly, I think, on this type of thing, comparing notes and making sure that they had like a very specific definition for each type of metal. So if you have one scribe that just has to deal with copper oxide ingots coming in, then to him using the same logogram as they used for bronze, it didn't really matter, because they knew in that context that it had to be copper and it wasn't going to be anything else. And then if you had somebody else dealing with the actual distribution of the ready mixed bronze out to other the actual bronze smiths. And again, that's also a huge question, because I'm not terribly sure how many bronze smiths would have been happy with the fact that their material turned up ready mixed, rather than them having control over the alloying process themselves. Then, you know, the scribe in charge of that, they only need to think about the material as the raw material going out to the smiths, and they don't have to worry about what that raw material actually consisted of in the first place. Any other questions? Been very quiet on the Zoom front. You are allowed to ask questions on Zoom. Okay, looks like that may be it for Lavinia then. So can I ask Wojciech to come up to take questions? And does anybody in the room have a question for Wojciech? Or in the, where's the question then? Agira, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to congratulate all three speakers of this session. They gave really fascinating talks, and I would like to ask Wojciech, I'm not pronouncing it very well, sorry, your name. You made a very interesting link between the gold mining activities at Amalara, the site at Amalara, with population increase during the Iron Age. And I wanted you, if you can please elaborate a bit more on that, like, is it like this conclusion about the population increase coming from demographic data? Is it coming from settlement data? And if it is that we have cultural data or even anthropological data that people are drawn in to Amalara from greater distance, not just the immediate periphery to the site. So if you can give us a bit more background and more information to population increase during the Iron Age in relation possibly to gold mining activities, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, it will be a little bit hard because we didn't make excavation on the Amalara, but in the archaic period, the people from probably the same people, because we don't have gaps in the occupation. Move from very small tumba, as I told you before, 60 meters approximately, to two much bigger settlements, the Trapeza, around 4 hectares with Acropolis, and the second one, Plateau, even bigger because it's 6 hectares. And to be honest, this is all we know about it. We don't have any more data about it.
Great.
Just the size of the archaeological site.
Great, thank you. I just thought it'd be fascinating to see also the burial practices and see if there is some evidence of people drawn in. But I mean, yeah, I thank you very much for your reply.
The next increase we have in the 6th century with new settlement in northern part of the site.
Thank you.
If I can add to this, Argiro, this is Evie, Triantaphyllou. This is very common in Central Macedonia to have a late Bronze Age tell, which then can be converted to a trapezite table with population with people who move to the outskirts of the tel and other groups that stay on tel. So this is not a unique practice that we see in Amalara. It is a very common habitation practice that we see in Central Macedonia in most of the tels, which then become tables. I mean, a very typical one is the Thessaloniki tuba. tell with the table on the outskirts of the tuba tell. Okay.
Yes, and in this time between the Bronze and the Iron Age, we didn't identify any huge difference in the landscape. This rocks debris comes from probably the 6th century, not from this time between Bronze Age and the Iron Age. So yes, it's common in Central Macedonia.
Yeah, thank you both. Thanks very much.
Do we have any other questions for Wojciech? Oh, yes, we do have one. Joseph Maran.
Can you please repeat, why do you think that the gold mining started in the early Bronze Age? How do you date the Bronze Age mining activities?
Okay. We don't have any evidence about the gold mining in the Bronze Age. But the location of the tumba high in the mountains is not very typical for the settlement patterns in Antemus Valley, because all of the tumbas, except one, are in the bottom of the valley. So this is only about the location of the site, and after the test of feasibilities, every other's Bronze Age settlements are visible to each other, except the Amalara. So we are looking for expectation of the localization of the site. We don't have any strong evidence for that. But we have tumba on the gold deposits with Macedonian pottery. So it's
would be interesting to
interesting.
Excavate on the
yes.
tumba.
But we have a little bit similar situation with Agios Mamas. Also, there is in North Greece, there is also the alluvial deposits and tumba Kastanas.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, looks like it's continued. Thank you very much, Wojciech. So finally, can I ask Giorgia if you could come back on, and if anybody has any questions for Giorgia, either in the room or on Zoom? Oh, yes, there is Assunta.
Hi, Giorgia. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. And my question comes possibly maybe just from because I think I've lost some information, so I would like you to please repeat something. For instance, the chronology of the X, the I single blade X, and from Achaia, and then possibly some more ideas about the possible context of provenance, because we know that it is a hoard, but do you think since it is a hoard, it might come more likely from a settlement? I'm thinking about free sea hoards, for instance, from Migdalia. So is there any candidate, any guess about the exact location, even though we just know that it's just the area around Patra? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions. The first one, about the chronology of the single blade axe, is around 10th century, in a final Bronze Age. Because in Puglia, in the Rocca Vecchia, there are a few shares about the end of the late Helladic 3C sub-Mycenaean. And it's a very interesting and a new thing because you can confirm these contacts up to 10th century, so the final stage of final Bronze Age. It could be a new remark. The second, Bosanquet said about this axis, and maybe in a Patras district and in area of necropolis, because he talked about some graves and in that context about this hoard, but not more precisely.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here and ask you a more general question, Giorgia. I was wondering what you think about the relationship specifically between Achaia and the areas of Italy that you've been studying during this final Bronze Age period. And do you think that on the metallurgy evidence, it's possible to say that what we're looking at is two groups which have a very close relationship, or is it actually they see themselves just a single group which is simply divided across two different geographies?
There is a huge project by Jung and archaeometric analysis, so we will waiting for these results. I think that Achaia within Elis and Northern Arcadia is a general and a whole geographic system. You can observe some similar solution about the organization in funerary ideology, both in the Patras area, in Portes area, and both in Elis. So I think that Patras is a huge area. From that you can have this contact, but also a system, a capillary system in a territory. For example, it's important of Tecos di Mayon on Cape Araxos. You can control all east part of that Mediterranean, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome everyone to our poster session, our second to last session. We will have 5 presentations in total, 3 in person and 2 online. And we will start with our own Monika Łapińska, who will present a subject called A Dualism of the Lily in the Aegean Seals, Ornament Sign Concept. And Monika is a final year MA student here at the Faculty of Archaeology, University of Warsaw. She is currently researching the iconography of the lily flower in Bronze Age Greece and its perception by the cultures of the time. She has chosen metallurgy and zoology as side paths. So welcome, Monika. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Are we ready? Okay, so again, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to present a poster which includes results of the analysis of 18 seals with representations of lilies in the sequences of Cretan hieroglyphic scripts. This is purely iconographic
analysis due to the fact that I do not deal with writing on a daily basis, but with the iconography of the lily flower in Aegean world. For the beginning, I would like to say that today's scholars consider this flower as an ornament. Nevertheless, the results of the analysis may suggest that it also had a sign function. Analysis of the representations from the seals have revealed three main arguments. The first is the size of these representations relative to the other signs. It can be seen that the lily was often the same size as the other signs and occupied a specially designed space. Sometimes it was also placed by force, as if someone wanted to be in that particular place in the sequence. The second argument is about the way the empty space was filled. There are seals where the lily could occupy more spaces if it were to act as an ornament. There are also representations where we can see a way of filling the background with linear patterns that do not overwhelm the main signs, including the lily. It also has analogies of this use of the use of agate and leg signs in the sequence with other confirmed signs, for example, with the bull's head or flags. The last, and it seems the most important argument, speaks of the repetitive nature of the sequence containing the representations of the lily. The first contains 1 or 2 lilies with signs 044 and sign 049. We have 5 examples of that. The second sequence consists of 010 and 1 or 2 lilies and repeats 4 times. It's important to say that in 4 examples, 1 is showing only with leg sign and with lilies. The third are signs depicting animal heads like sheep, cattle, or donkey, along with a single lily. This sequence repeats 3 times. The lily from the stone seals in scriptamina 1, known as number 90, could therefore be continued in the linear scripts through number 87 as a transitional form, and eventually appear as sign AB47. Of course, further research is needed, not only from the philological angle, but I prefer to leave that to the specialists. I do, however, encourage a discussion on this subject and possible of seeing the lily as a sign in this context. Thank you.
Thank you, Monika. Now I would like to invite Jan Bobik from Charles University in Prague. Jan is a master student of classical archaeology at Charles University in Prague. He's currently finishing his thesis on zoomorphic plastic decorations on pottery from Western Anatolia in the 2nd millennium BCE. And to research this topic, he participated for 3 seasons in the Gigaya. Exactly, and revisited unpublished material from the Troy archive in Tübingen. He has also participated in archaeological projects in Northern Macedonia, Uzbekistan, and the Czech Republic, of course. The results of his work have been already presented at conferences, for example, in Prague, in Nicosia, and in Pilsen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks for having me here. I'm here today to give you a brief introduction of my research for my master thesis and describe the most important aspects of this material, as well as to show possibilities of further research on this topic. While not receiving much of interest so far, the zoomorphic decorations on pottery of Western Anatolia turned out to be an interesting feature of this region and period, and I hope my results will be relevant also to the Aegean experts. The zoomorphic decorations on pottery appear in significant quantities in several forms and on many important sites of Western Anatolia during the whole 2nd millennium BCE. And to this date, I was able to identify 325 pieces from 22 sites of Western Anatolia. And this number keeps rising as new results from sites are published. So far, 7 different types of decoration were identified: reliefs, appliques of whole animals, protomes, horned handles and pronged attachments, along with spouts in shapes of animal heads and zoomorphic vessels. Most appliques came from Troy and Kaimakchi, and together they form almost 3/4 of all collected material. But this fact is rather given by the state of research and publication. Chronologically speaking, as I said, they cover all 2nd millennium BCE, and general view on development shows us that popularity of zoomorphic decorations grows since the beginning of Middle Bronze Age and climaxed in 14th century during the Late Bronze Age too. In wares, we can see that specific types prefer certain wares, and this situation differs in region and as time period progresses. The far most used was Anatolian grey ware, and this fact is rather surprising, as the popularity of this ware declined since Late Bronze Age 1. Especially striking is the situation at Kaimakchi, where Anatolian grey ware seems to dominate with more than 75% in case of protomes. However, grey ware doesn't represent more than 25% of pottery in an excavated area. Side distribution can be found all over northwestern Anatolia, but is so far absent in the southwestern coastal regions. As the title suggests, after analyzing and comparing trends in Western Anatolia itself, I have compared zoomorphic decorations from Western Anatolia with surrounding regions. While Greece, Aegean, and Cyprus show different decorating traditions, Central Anatolia offers certain similarities, especially during the Assyrian trade colonies period. This period corresponds to the first occurrence of new types of decoration in Western Anatolia, appliques in shapes of whole animals, spouts in shapes of animal heads, and protomes themselves. All are characteristic for Kultepe in this period. It is possibly no coincidence that the first occurrence of these types is situated either in inner parts of Western Anatolia or lies along expected trade routes to western shores. This can imply possible influence of Assyrian trade colonies on the style development of decorations in Western Anatolia. Central Anatolia can also offer help in function and symbolism of animal appliques. In later Hittite religion and ritual text, it is written that animal vessels and figurines were regularly used in religion festivals and in various of rituals. Moreover, certain animals like bull, horse, ram, or deer could be used also as a representation of deities or their attributes. It is not unlikely that similar symbolism could exist in western part of Anatolia, as we know that some of Hittite ritual texts represent Luwian tradition. More surprisingly, we can see similarities between exclusively Troy decorations of handles and handles of Subapennine and Terramara pottery in Italian recent Bronze Age. This corresponds with first occurrence of horned handles and pronged attachments in Troy. At this point, it seems more plausible that this is only a coincidence and both regions have their own development. However, growing evidence of rich contacts between Italy and Aegean and finds of similar types of handle decorations in Adriatic and Balkan regions could bring a new light to this topic in the future. Last aspect I would like to present here is the fragmentation of protomes and animal appliques, best exemplified at Troy and Kaimakchi. Out of 120 appliques found there, not one was found with a significant part of vessel body preserved. Interestingly, at both Troy and Kaimakchi, we can see several pairs of almost identical appliques found, however, in different parts of the settlement. Excluding post-depositional processes, this could be done by 2 ways. Appliques were made in stylistic groups and on different vessels carried through settlement, or they were part of one vessel and after breakage, unintentional or intentional, kept and carried to different parts of the settlement. To sum up, we can say that animal appliques in Western Anatolia is a topic that deserves more interest in the future. This type of decoration can possibly fill the gap in Western Anatolian iconographic material, which is strikingly absent compared to Aegean and Near Eastern evidence. More importantly, they can also serve as possible evidence for the still unclear ritual aspects of Western Anatolian people, as well as for context and influences in these and surrounding regions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jan, for this very interesting analysis. And now I would like to invite Nikolaos Kouvalakis, who is in the 2nd year of his master's degree here at the Faculty of Archaeology, with bioarchaeology to be his degree specialization. Previously, he obtained his bachelor's diploma in the History and Archaeology department of the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Crete. His main interest lies in the social aspects of the archaeological evidence during the Neolithic, which is the basis of his master's thesis. Additionally, he is interested in osteology and digital and experimental archaeology. He has also taken part in excavations in Greece, Lavinia, Cyprus, and Poland. And he will be presenting his poster titled Assessing the Evidence for the Emergence of Social Inequality During the Neolithic, Case Studies from the region of modern-day Greece.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, and I'm really grateful for this invitation. Okay, yeah. This poster explores the topic of social inequality in Neolithic Greece. Through selected cases from Thessaly and Macedonia, the available archaeological evidence related to potential social differentiation were examined through architectural expression, burial practices, and material culture. The architectural remains in Neolithic Greece generally do not exhibit overt expressions of social inequality, although variations in housing size or the presence of communal buildings can provide some insights. Larger or more elaborate houses, differences in spatial structures of the settlements, as well as potentially specialized structures may indicate the presence of individuals who played particular roles within the community. However, no consolidated evidence supports this claim, and these variations are relatively subtle compared to later periods. Sesklo is the first example in Thessaly, which consists of two areas. Sesklo A houses on the Acropolis exhibit a continuity, both spatial and temporal, with a regular successive rebuilding of walls, floors, and openings. In the extended part of Sesklo B, the so-called polis, the succession is discontinuous in these terms, with houses in Sesklo B to be with tight clusters and common walls. These two areas can indicate differences and social structure. However, even if there are structures that may point in that direction, the construction of the houses of the polis is not aesthetically or technically inferior to or less equipped than the ones placed on the tell. As for the fortifications that they were found in the southwest of Sesklo A, they could imply social inequalities, although in my opinion, they had a rather symbolic role to indicate the space between the areas or practical one, for example, using these walls as an enclosure for animals, and they have not used as much as a defense from enemies or a border that encloses distinctive social differences. The second case, the case of the Mini, it has a fortification system of 6 or 7 concentric circuit walls, and the spatial contexts between the walls can be divided between houses used as domestic buildings and structures used as work areas, and they were non-domestic buildings. According to Suadzi, the architectural remains of the Mini do not provide explicit indications of social inequality or a hierarchical social structure. Any notion of authority or control at the Mini would have been fluid rather than institutionalized, and inequalities were apparently informal and ephemeral. Well, I tend to agree with that idea, since the wall may have been more practical than defensive mechanisms. For example, demarcating its function of the settlement, arranging the space according to the needs of community, and even as simply as to provide safety for the animals present there, and also to work as embankments for rainfall and soil corrosion. Moving on, burial practices can offer clues about social inequality as well. In some cases, burials with more elaborate treatment, such as the inclusion of great goods, may indicate higher status, higher social status or wealth. However, it is important to note that not all burials exhibit such differentiation, and communal or simple burials without grave goods are also common in Neolithic Greece. The late Neolithic cemetery of Platiama Lazarku contained only cremations of children and adults, with 67 in total. Moreover, a possible crematorium was identified on the same level as the cremation burials, which had significant traces of burning, burned human bones, and potsherds. In my view, having an area of crematorium and at the same time burials that they do not show explicit differences among them may indicate that this area was intended for all members of the community. After all, the custom of cremation seems to have been applied to all ages, infants, children, and adults, and gender does not seem to have played a significant part on that. On the other hand, at Makrigalos, which is also late Neolithic, primary and secondary burials were found. In phase 1 of the extensive settlement within the embankments of Ditch A, 19 articulated skeletons from main and secondary burials were found, which have been dumped directly into the trench while they were left without any special care. Additionally, the bones of 38 individuals were scattered in the residential area. These articulated human bones were also found in Trench B, along with scatter ones in the residential embankments, a total of 13 individuals. In the phase 2 of the settlement, at least 6 individuals, adults and children, were scattered in the residential embankments. In this case, I believe the skeleton's burial inside the ditches can indicate a practice where, in the matter of death at least, the individuals were considered somehow equal. Two examples will be presented regarding the evidence of material culture. In the case of Sesklo, there is an unequal distribution of quality painted pottery, with more elaborated pottery made with more advantageous clays appearing at Sesklo A. This pattern suggests social differences with an economic component and ideological asymmetry, although, according to Kouvalakis, not necessarily a formally stratified society with an elite controlling production. However, the base is too small to make definite statements. Besides that, I would suggest that even if the largest amount of it was in the Acropolis, the simultaneous presence of it in the flat area reduces the chance for that pottery to have been exclusively a privilege of the Acropolis people, and thus be a definite exponent of social inequality. The other case belongs to Makrigalos, where there are feasting events which play a significant role in the social, political, and economic domains of life, as well as negotiating social relationships through the consumption of food. At Makrigalos, the remains of communal consumption of food were found in the pit pie. The communality is further underlined by cooking vessels, which do not differ either in size or in shape and technology from those found in domestic contexts. None of the pottery has special in terms of, none of the pottery was special in terms of shape, size, or decoration, and technological and stylistic homogeneity implies that the serving of food in this communal context reinforced the strong sense of equality between households and groups. In conclusion, prehistoric social structures are considered to be dynamic and temporal, and therefore in a constant state of change. Moreover, the limitations of their available evidence should be taken into consideration, as the interpretations of social organization and inequality in prehistoric society heavily rely on it. We have also to count the chance that more perishable materials are difficult to locate due to the wear and tear that they were subject to. Overall, the relatively egalitarian nature of Neolithic Greek society suggests that social distinctions and inequalities were not as pronounced as in later periods. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, now we will start with our online poster presentations. So now I would like to know if Evangelia or Irene are here. Yes, Irene is here. Hi, hi, Irene.
Hey, good afternoon to you all.
Okay, thanks. You're here, so I will just make a short introduction, and then I will share your poster, and you can start. Okay, so you will be presenting, Irene, so I will present you first. Irene is an archaeologist of the Ephorate of Antiquities of Eastern Attica, Department of the Greek Archaeological Service. She holds a master's degree in the Ancient Mediterranean World Program of the Department of History and Archaeology at the University of Crete. She has conducted excavations at many sites in Attica and has participated in various conferences, of course. Her scientific interests include, among others, burial customs, especially of the Mycenaean period. She is also actively involved in documenting and promoting archaeological work by creating short documentaries. She directs the research project New Mycenaean Chamber Tombs from Mesogia Attica, which is funded by INSTA. While Evangelia Evi Papathoma completed her undergraduate studies at the Department of Conservation of Antiquities and Works of Art of the Technological Education Institute of Athens. She holds and Master of Science in Applied Archaeological Sciences of the Department of Mediterranean Studies of the University of Aegean, and she is a PhD candidate in the Department of Conservation of Antiquities and Works of Art of the University of Western Attica. She has been awarded a scholarship by the Research Committee of the University of Aegean for her outstanding performance ability. Since 2010, she has been the head of the Laboratory of Conservation of Metal Finds and Waterlogged Wooden Objects in the Archaeological Museum of Vrettou for the Ministry of Culture in Greece. Her research work is focused on applying spectroscopic non-destructive techniques, XRF, Raman, FTIR, to the identification of ancient materials and construction techniques. Okay.
So are we ready? Yes. Okay. Good afternoon to you all, of course. Firstly, I would like to thank the committee for inviting us to this conference and accepting our proposal. Today, I will present you the results of the collaboration between the archaeometric and the archaeological study on a group of finds that were discovered in Chamber Tomb at the Mycenaean Cemetery of Lycanera. Firstly, I would like to say that the pottery of this tomb, of this Chamber Tomb, was examined with non-invasive techniques using portable instruments, which allowed us to examine all the finds at low cost. Specifically, we applied XRF, Raman, and FTIR techniques. Among the vessels of this tomb, there were two cups, two kiafi, of the FS 220 type, dated in late Helladic 3B1. Their inner surface was covered with white deposits. The XRF showed strong presence of calcium and silicon, while iron, aluminium, sulfur, and potassium appeared reduced since they came from the ceramic background. This led us to look for organic material in those deposits, and we found casein, the main protein of milk, and its amino acids. The milk was of animal origin. Now, milk was used in the burial practice for libations, but here, and also as a food offering. Here we have two vessels of two open-shaped vessels, drinking vessels, which were probably filled with milk because, as we can see, the deposits reached up to the lip of the vessels. So it is safe to assume that the milk here was intended as a food offering and not for libations. Additionally, in the same tomb, we found a feeding bottle of the FS 161 type. It is contemporary to the cups, and the XRF found in it the FTIR found in it traces of milk, but we need the further analysis to confirm that. Feeding bottles are usually linked to children because they were used for feeding them, but this one is too big to be used by a child. The spout of the vessel clearly served for pouring out liquids, and the handle for carrying the vessel. So, combining all this data together, we conclude that the two cups were deposited in the tomb in the first half of the 13th century, accompanying one or several of the burials. They were filled with milk, which was intended as a food offering to the dead. In fact, recent anthropological studies have shown that the inhabitants of Vilcanera did consume dairy products. It is possible that the feeding bottle was used to pour out the milk into the vessels, into the cups, and was later on left in the chamber as a gift itself. The whole process probably took place in the chamber, and at a later phase, during one of the reopenings, the cups were served aside. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Monika. Obviously, I'm about to display my great knowledge of any of the Aegean scripts here, but the script signs that you refer to, the ones which you see in them, the development of the lily, have any of those been ascribed a different meaning by other scholars at all?
Yes, yes. So first of all, we need to mention Evans, of course, here. Can we? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I would like to show you already. Okay. So Evans mentioned possibility of interpretations of number AB 47, which you can see here, as a tulip or iris, but we don't have like another mentions in different publications of his, or just in that one publication, Scripta Minoa 2, of like analogies of it. We don't see analogies for the lily in the for the tulip or iris as a sign. So after that was my concern first of all, of course. That's why I was trying to look for similarities and differences between signs we know already. And that's how evolution, actually, I create evolution of it. Of course, it's just my like try of finding solution as like, sorry, I know the sentence. Yeah, I'm just trying to find if we can actually see this evolution of the sign, or it's just AB new number in the linear scripts. That's it. Yeah. But Evans was thinking about tulip for that. So yes.
But nobody has ever come up with an alternative idea of what number 90 or number 87 are supposed to look
No,
like.
90 also Evans suggests as lily. Number 87 also was suggested, but he was thinking more about AB 47 than number 90. So that's why I connected these two. And also we know that number 19 we can find only on the stone seals, and number 87 and AB 47 on the clay seals, clay tablet seals. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any more questions? No, so if I can ask you a question, don't run. Just a short question. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer, but I was wondering if you'll try. If during your research, were you able to observe well, similarities between other signs, other types of probable evolutions of signs?
I had problem with the sign we know as crocus sign or saffron sign, and that when I started working on this research, I thought that maybe this one can be lily, but after many analogies to it, I decided that no, it's definitely saffron or crocus, and we should try to find some analogies for this tool we have already on poster. Yeah. Yeah, crocus is tricky. Yes.
I will just ask if we have some question online.
No.
No, so we are free to go. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to invite again Jan. If we have some questions for Jan from the room, maybe. Or online. So I can use this opportunity because, sorry, I have actually a couple of questions because you, during your research, you mentioned that you were able to identify a few species of the animals. You mentioned horse.
Yeah, the most usual were horses. The usual were horses, which actually corresponds with occurrence of first horses' bones in Troy, what is interesting itself. And very usual species was also is bovine or oxys, and it's not completely clear, but also birds. Actually, this could represent birds. Yes, and because they are so stylized, it is usually not so easy to determine the species of animal, but also rams. Yeah.
Here comes my follow-up question. If you were able to, if there was a regional preference between the animal and the type of decoration, or maybe just animal recreated in different types of this plastic decoration?
Actually, in species of animal, there is no clear differences between regions, what is also connected to the uncertainty of the species of animals. So maybe yes, but we cannot see it because we cannot recognize the animal. But in terms of types, yes, what is shown here. For example, what they call reliefs appear mostly in Meander Valley and in Beice Sultan. They don't appear, let's say, in Troy, in Lesbos, neither actually in Meander Valley, not in Izmir Gulf. And also appraisal hornbills, they also appear more in inland, and there are just few examples from coastlines, what is actually Limantepe, what should be a harbor, trade harbor, maybe, and also in Troy, 2 pieces. So yeah, there are certain differences in the regions.
So just 2 pieces in Troy, and you said that you were, there were more than 300. Okay, and yes. This is just another follow-up question. Do you have any idea what would be the reason for such a distribution of the animals, animals depictions?
Not for animal species, but in types of decorations, there can be a possible reasons. As I mentioned, this possible influence of Central Anatolia. That's why the first species occur in England or around trade routes. Also, reliefs appear together with the more conservative wares, so in red or brown wares, what is mostly in inland regions, as I mentioned. Yes. And yeah, according to regional preferences, there is clear preference in horned handles and pronged attachments, which are specific only for Troy, and in case of pronged attachments, few pieces on Lesbos with what could be connected with Troy influence.
Okay, thank you. Sevi has a question.
Thank you, Jan, for your presentation. Can you link them to specific contexts? You may have mentioned it, but I mean, ritual, ceremonial, utilitarian. What kind of context where you can find them?
This is a hard question. There are some indications that there could be, in some cases, not for all decorations, but especially in cases, as I mentioned, for spouts, for appliques of whole animals, which are usually collected at least in Central Anatolia, and in a few cases you can say that it was also in Western Anatolia. This time they are connected to so-called features we were supposed to be used in libation, at least in Central Anatolia, and we can expect some similarities in Western Anatolia. As I mentioned, in ritual texts, we can recognize some Aluvian traditions. So
thank you. And another question, if I may, is are you planning to carry out some petrographic analysis in order to find define workshops? Is there one workshop that is manufacturing this kind of pottery, or there are several?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the second part of question. Yeah.
All right. Are you planning to do some petrographic analysis in order to define the workshops, the pottery workshops that they manufacture this, where this pottery come from? Is it local? Are there workshops that are specialized in this type of pottery?
It's not clear. Unfortunately, we have not enough data to say it. In case of Kaimakchi, what is the only site I had access to the primary material, so to appliques itself. We don't have many clear contexts from which we could say if they are to say more about it. But in general, at least in case of Troy, it looks like they were. At least we have some concentrations in Citadel and in around it. What is also maybe because we don't have many data from lower town, but it is hard to say. And petrographic analysis, unfortunately, not. It could be interesting, especially from the perspective of fragmentation, but unfortunately not.
Any more questions to Jan? Okay, Assunta.
Okay, I have actually two questions. The first one comes from my, let's say, ignorance about this, the Anatolian pottery. As for the earliest, can you hear me? Okay, better. As for the earliest examples, and I wonder, I think I have in mind images with the vessels with human figures also. So I would like to ask you whether there is a predominance of human representation above animal representation, and whether this is a change with the later phase when you see zoomorphic plastic decorations. And then the second question, if you could possibly expand on this comparison you see, for instance, with recent Bronze Age Italy, whether you think it's more a connection with, in general, the practice of emphasizing the handle because it is related to drinking vessels and it is possibly related to drinking practices and display. So do you think there is this kind of connection between the two phenomenon, or do you mean some other kind of connection? Because I know in Italy there is a real true obsession with the zoomorphic handle, and yes.
Yeah. So first question, yes, I think what you meant were this kind of jugs or vases with human faces. They are typical mostly for Troy, but also in other regions, but in early Bronze Age, when we actually don't have many of zoomorphic decorations. So yes, but in later phases like Middle Bronze Age and early Late Bronze Age, there are not many of them, just few, at least I'm aware just only about few pieces in Izmir region and in the northwestern part of Anatolia. But it's already the time when we have plenty of zoomorphic decorations. So possibly then there could be this turn from human face or from human figures to zoomorphic decorations. But as I wasn't studying early Bronze Age and this shift to Middle Bronze Age, what is really unclear, still unclear, I cannot answer for sure if there is such. It may be. And the second question, it's really hard to say, and I really don't know. It could be possibly the same, but when we look at development in Troy, where we have these handles with these horned handles and pronged attachments, there is possibility that they are just new, some new kind of decorations, but there is also theory that they could develop from handles, from these protomes, and they were more and more stylized and became only these horned handles. But they are very specific because they occur only on this type of cup, the black and cold 8-100, and only one or two pieces in another shape. So it could be some specific reason why they chose these specific types, that you can see one vertical and one horizontal handle, what is also not very typical for pottery in Western Anatolia. So possibly there could be some meaning behind it, but it's very hard to determine if it was like this or not. And in Italian, it is hard to get find out, as I was studying Italian comparison just very shortly and not so deep. So I really cannot say if it's the same development, but they are very similar. So maybe, but I would say it's more about an emphasizing of animals, what can be somehow connected with drinking practice. I hope I answered.
Yes, do we have any more questions from the room? For Jan? Okay, we'll check. Is there any question online for Jan? For our online participants? No, everything is clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now I would like to invite again Nikolaos.
Any questions then?
Yeah, sorry, you can start thinking about questions while I do we have Sevi and we have Yannick, so maybe we can start with Sevi.
Thank you, Nico. It was nice to see a little bit of Neolithic northern Greece. In what criteria you based the selection of the sites that you presented us?
Okay. Well, I think
Because,
that's
okay, just to
please.
Yeah, because there is a lot of fresh evidence from northern Greece, and I see that you chose only Makrigialos, which is, of course, perhaps the first site with a very fresh evidence. We have the last 20 years, but we have many sites in Western Macedonia, in Central Macedonia. And why you chose Makrigialos and not another site, or a region, specific region? And when you are talking about social inequalities, how do you define them? Do you link them to specific individuals, to groups? Yes.
The whole perception, you mean? How am I? Okay. Well, to start with your first question, I had to make a poster and a presentation that it should, well, try to figure out to give let's say the best examples that I could get. So I chose the most maybe famous ones, or the ones that they were most excavated and we have more evidence upon. Of course, in the final form of my thesis, I will have more sites and more new ones. I know that. And like I don't know, like Tuba Thessaloniki, as you mentioned before, and other sites. But I had to make a selection of sites, and in order to make this presentation, I even exceeded 5 minutes. So, and yeah, I am aware that there are new sites, and I will try to make the best out of it, so I can include them and have them in my thesis in the final form. I chose Macedonia and Thessaly because I think that they show a lot of they can show a lot of evidence of this case studying, searching about inequality. If you are and about the second question about my notion of regarding the inequality factor. Well, I'm trying to see. I'm trying to investigate whether there is either. I think having an individual specifically, it would be kind of hard to find any specific evidence for a particular person. I think it would have been more like a family or a group that they have been. I don't know, have more benefits at some point inside the community, and they would play a different role in that. Either, I don't know, being responsible for, I don't know, storage, safety, or distribution, or having a bigger amount of the portion that is destined to the community. I consider that to be some kind of I don't know, a preliminary form of inequality inside the society. That, of course, later it was shown in a more excessive way, but in my opinion, it had to start somewhere, and in some form that it was not so. How can I say it? It wasn't so visible, but still the process was started to begin inside the society, or in the community that we're talking about. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That was really interesting. I was thinking, I was reading along with your section on Sesklo. Yeah, very interesting that there's two distinct areas, but that the architecture in them is really quite differently. Maybe not the architecture itself, but at least the spatial organization of it. Yet the conclusion is that it's relatively egalitarian. Absolutely fine with me as well, but how do you then account for the differences between the two areas? Is that just a matter of this was the space available and this was the best solution, a practical arrangement? Or do you see that the architecture reflects some differences between two groups, partly perhaps living there? How are you thinking about it?
What you mean is why I went for these specific ones, or what are these sites are projecting like in a different way? I know that they are in some ways different. I mean, they're both in Etel. Yeah, and we have differences in Sesklo and Dimini, that's for sure. But yeah, what's your actual question? Sorry for that. But.
Well, within Sesklo, there seem to be differences on the basis of the architecture. What would be the inference of that? Do we see two completely different groups? Why is it so different?
You mean why, for example, in Sesklo, two different kinds of settlements, they were organized in the same place? Well, to begin with, I think that specifically for Sesklo, the special, well, the matter of space is of importance, because when the houses on the Acropolis are building on the same place again and again, it can mean that it can be a continuity that it's connected to some kind of hereditary legacy or something. But on the other way, there is a limitation of the space on the Tel, on the Acropolis. So they didn't really had a lot of options, even if they wanted to. On the other side, on the flat settlement, they had all the space that they wanted. Actually, I would like to include here another interpretation about this. It's from Kouvalakis, and there is a suggestion about the flat settlement to be a continuation or some kind of an evolution from the Acropolis, because he says that there may be a specific pattern in the clusters in the flat settlement, that they are all together, and there might be some kind of a central building, but there is also the idea of kind of a household group of people, not specifically families like blood related, but in a more general way. People are having like a group of people that they are living together, and we see that they are just building houses. They're not rebuilding at the same place. They're just rebuilding to just next to it or something like that. And yeah, well, for me, firstly, it's about the space, the available space, and then if we are taking it to a matter of different, I don't know, social structure between these two, we could say that actually no, I don't really want to go there, because I'm not really into, I don't really, well, there is nothing definite, and I don't really believe that there was such a big social differentiation between them. Even if we have two different kinds of settlements in the same site, I don't think that the social differentiation between them it was so big or so definite or visible. thank you.
Do we have any more questions to Nikolaos? No, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now, since we have skipped one poster, I would like to ask you if you have any questions to Evangelia's and Irene's poster. Okay, so we start online. Okay. Okay, Aguirre, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. We can't hear.
Good point.
Thank you.
Hello again. I really enjoyed your presentation, Evangelia, and I find it very interesting that you were able to identify the substance in those two cups. I wanted to ask you a bit more of a detail on the burials. I mean, you interpreted these drinks as a drink to the dead. So who are these people that they offered this milk to? Do we know? Were they? What was their sex? What was their age? Were they young individuals or were they adults?
The cups were found near two male burials. One was intact, belonging to a man over 40 years old, over 50 years old. And the other was swept aside, the lower limbs of a male. Mm-hmm. We cannot be sure if we can see the poster again. We cannot be sure if whether they belong to the burial 3 or 4, but they were found near these two burials. They could easily have been swept aside, the cups.
Okay, thank you. That's very nice. And also, you did XRF, right? Is that correct? For
XRF, 50IR, and Raman. But if I remember correctly, on the feeding model, only FTIR.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I wanted to suggest also that it will be interesting to run some more specific protein analysis to see what kind of species, like this milk, this casein that you mentioned, comes from. Yes. I don't know. Apparently, it's in your plans because I see you noting.
Upcoming plan, yes, it's an upcoming plan.
Great. Thank you very much, Evangelia.
Thank you.
We're trying to put up the poster and still be able to see the author. In the meantime, I would like to ask if you have any more questions.
Yes, I have a question to Irene. I don't know if Irene can hear me.
Yes, very well.
Okay. So my question is in line with first Argyros question, but it's about the feeding bottle. I want to ask you, how do you think if this feeding bottle was together with adult burials, because it was because of functional reasons? Maybe it was something like milk jug or something like this, or maybe because of connection with feeding function and children and feeding small kids. And of course, there is one of the theories that burial is like return to woman's womb, and it would be something in agreement with this theory. Thank you.
I'm not sure I heard the complete question because I had some gaps. The feeding model was found by the skull of the male burial of the man over 50 years old. Next to it, there was a jug, spouted jug. I find it's not a coincidence that two spouted vessels were found on the same burial by the skull. I believe that they were used for pouring out a liquid. Children were not found in this tomb. And we have nor remains, nor find a gift that would correlate the child. I'm not sure I have answered your question.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any more questions? Okay, perfect. I think we still have time for one before we run out of time for the coffee break. Could you pass the microphone to Eva?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for a very interesting poster. I did presented a paper yesterday about feeding bottles, earlier feeding bottles and smaller feeding bottles. And this example highlights exactly the problems concerning the larger specimens and the multiple burials, etc., etc. But it's interesting to see for me anyway that it's linked with the pouring or something of milk. And now my real question starts with the non-invasive methods you applied. Is it are they working only with visible deposits of substances in vessels, or even if no visible traces of the substances can be found?
No, we applied those techniques. Well, we have traces of several kinds on the vessels. So we applied all of them not destructive to see what they were in all the vessels. But here it was very visible. The white deposits were very visible at the time of the excavation, so it was easier to look for them and more interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the presenters.
And the first presentation is by Niki, Papakonstantinou, and Sevasti, Triantaphyllou, Bones on Fire, a reconsideration of the use of fire on human remains in the prehistoric Aegean. So Niki Papakonstantinou is an osteologist with BA in archaeology and MA in prehistoric archaeology, and Master in Sciences in Human Osteology and Funerary Archaeology, and PhD in Prehistoric Archaeology, specializing in the excavation of mortuary assemblages and the analysis of commingled and fragmentary human remains. She has participated in a number of excavations throughout Greece and has been involved in several research projects on the study of skeletal material from Crete and the Greek mainland. She has also worked on as a contract archaeologist for the Greek Ministry of Culture. She is currently a scientific associate in the TEFRA research project directed by Sevasti Triantaphyllou. And Sevasti, who received her PhD from the University of Sheffield in 2000, is associate professor of prehistoric archaeology at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and since 2020 also the director of the Thessaloniki Tumba University excavation. She is currently principal investigator of the TEFRA project on the use of fire on human remains in the prehistoric Aegean, and principal collaborator in the documentation and publication of the cemeteries at Kefalapetras in eastern Crete and at Koumassa in central Crete. Her research involves the application of state-of-the-art analytical methods and participates in the discussion of contemporary themes which concern social bioarchaeology and funerary archaeology in the prehistoric Aegean, such as the manipulation of the deceased, paleodiet, population mobility, etc. Okay, the floor is yours, Niki.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. First, we would like, both Sevi and me, would like to thank the organizing committee for giving us the opportunity to come in Warsaw and see this exciting city for the first time and meet very nice people, of course. Thank you for the hospitality. And let's light more fire in the room now. The occurrence of heat-induced effects on human remains in the Aegean, with a particular emphasis on the burial practice of cremation and its origins, has drawn the attention of several scholars for a long time. Although the practice of cremation signposts the early Iron Age, increasing the evidence of the use of fire on human bones throughout the Neolithic and the Bronze Age Aegean has been revealed in the last decades. This indicates the variable performance of the practice, occurring either in the form of partial burning. I have a problem with this. Yes, occurring either in the form of partial burning of fleshed, defleshed, or skeletonized remains, or as intentional combustion of the human corpse. Although the end result of this process may look similar, it is evident that the act of body exposure to fire involves a complex suite of activities, as well as a wide sequence and range of choices made at all stages of these rites. Variations in the firing procedure and the funeral rituals associated with it may reflect different social behaviors and the living community's ideological and cosmological attitudes to the human body. Moreover, the use of fire might have different meanings both within and between cultural contexts. This suggests that there is a need for a thorough and diachronic re-examination of the occurrence of heat-induced effects and the use of fire on human remains in the Aegean. In this respect, today we are presenting the first results of an updated overall evaluation of the phenomenon in the Aegean during the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, based on published excavation data with evidence of fire on human skeletal remains. This research has been implemented in the framework of the ongoing research project of TEFRA, funded by the Hellenic Foundation of Research and Innovation. The project is the first comprehensive and interdisciplinary study on the effect of fire on human remains from the prehistoric and protohistoric Aegean, applied on a broad geographical and time scale through the integration of published excavation data, macroscopic and microscopic analysis on human bones, analytical methods, and experimental pyrotechnology. Archaeological cases of burned or cremated human remains, as well as the use of fire in funerary rituals and the treatment of the dead, have been systematically collected and entered in a relational database specially designed and created for the project, including different categories of information related to the archaeological site and context, the architectural and structural features, the urns, the associated objects, and the skeletal material. Although the development and the origins of the practice, especially after the collapse of the Mycenaean palaces, have been often connected by researchers to cultural diffusion and or migration from the surrounding regions, including Italy, the Balkans, and most commonly Anatolia, cremations are attested already since the Neolithic time, mainly in Macedonia, Thessaly, and central Greece, while a few cases have been traced on certain sites in Attica, Peloponnese, and Crete. The earliest known cremation cases, dating back to the early Neolithic, have been found in Soufli Magoula in Thessaly and in Reginio in central Greece. The tumulus in Heronia in central Greece and the Prosimna cave in Argolid are the only known Middle Neolithic sites with burned human remains. Late Neolithic cremations are more numerous, brought to light in several sites in Western and Central Macedonia, in Thessaly and in Attica. Unlike the cemeteries of early Neolithic Soufli Magoula and late Neolithic Platia Magoula Zarku and Touba Kremastis Kyladas, where the existence of a real burial ground is attested, as well as other funerary contexts such as the Katsabas and Prosimna caves in Crete and in central Greece, respectively, Most of the contexts seem to have a domestic character, since they have been found in the housing area of the living community, within pits, underneath house floors, next to household hearths, or within other settlements contexts. During the earlier Neolithic phases, the partially or fully burned bones were placed directly in shallow pits without the use of a cinerary vessel. It is only from the late Neolithic onwards that cremated remains were primarily located in urns, which were subsequently deposited in pits within the settlement area and domestic contexts or in cemeteries. In some cases, urns were covered by another vessel or a sherd. As for the pots containing the cremated remains, it appears that the dominant types of urns are amphorae, bowls, cups, and closed vessels. The shapes of the burial pots were inspired by vessels usually associated with storage and drinking. While there are regional differences in the shapes chosen, chosen to be used as urns. Amphorae cups and skyphoi were used exclusively in Thessaly, while there is a clear preference for bowls, closed vessels, such as whole mouth and neck jars in Western Macedonia. Most grave goods interred with the cremation burials do not show evidence that they were burned with the deceased on the funerary pyre. The type and amount of associated objects are variable, involving mainly vessels and sherds, primarily with a drinking and storage function, tools and items of jewelry such as beads, rings, and earrings. In Soufli Magula and Tuba Kremastis Kyladas, besides the human remains, burned or unburned animal bones were also included in the final deposition within the pits or inside the urns, while charred archaeobotanical remains were rare. Among Neolithic cremations, individuals for which demographic estimations were possible belong to both sex groups and cover all age categories. In general, there are no obvious signifiers of age or sex differentiation in terms of the treatment of the body, the type of vessels used as urns, or the objects that accompanied the remains of the deceased. Although we should keep in mind that for a large number of individuals, sex was not possible to be estimated. Nevertheless, there is a tendency for male remains to be placed inside urns more often than females, while regarding the type of urns, different shapes of vessels were used for the two sexes. Although inhumation was by far the most common disposal method, cremation was also practiced in a wider geographical area during the Bronze Age, reaching a peak during the late Bronze Age, while it is attested mainly in funerary archaeological contexts. By the early Bronze Age, evidence of burned bones are almost exclusively traced in extramural cemeteries, except for the Skaliou in Kieros, Avles in Kozani, and Berbati in the Argolith, where cremations have been discovered in domestic contexts. Cremated or partially burned bones are attested in high numbers in Central and Western Macedonia, like at Kriaritsi Sikia, Nea Skioni, and in Kozani in the sites Goules and Xeropigado Kyladas, in the Ionian Islands, at Sthenoi Lefkas, and in Crete. Although the joint use of cremation and inhumation is observed, at Kriaritsi on the Chalkidiki Peninsula, the rule was cremation in earths located in well-organized tumuli. Cremated or burned bones are found in a variety of archaeological contexts, including pits, pyres in the case of the tumulus at Sthenoi, slab line thickets in Agios Mamas and Kriaritsi, as well as collective tholos and house tombs accommodating multiple burials and used for long periods, mainly from Crete. The only cases of primary cremation have been documented at the Tumulus Cemetery at Sthenoi, while differential burning of the human remains often interpreted as an act of fumigation, practical cleansing, or as a symbolic practice, is related mainly to funeral context in Crete. In terms of the type of cinerary urn used for the secondary deposition of bones in earth, this varied by region. Although bowls comprise the most common shape in Central Macedonia, other vessel types, such as pithoi, amphora, and jugs, are preferred in Kozani in Western Macedonia, on Lefkada, and in the Peloponnese. Grave goods mostly consist of drinking and serving vessels, weaponry, jewelry, tools, and a limited number of weaving and clothing items. In most cases, artifacts accompanying burned remains show no evidence that they were burned except from some weapons and animal bones from Lefkada. Sex and age groups are not strictly associated with any particular cremation type or grave good categories. However, it is worth noting that at Xeropyga Kyladas, the 12 cremations mostly belonged to subadults. Moving to the Middle Bronze Age, evidence for the effect of fire on human remains and the practice of cremations are few, restricted either to collective tombs from Crete with partially burned skeletal remains, commingled with unburned skeletal material, or to occasional instances of cremations, as for example in the case of possible primary cremations in Tumulus S from the foot of Skaros on Lefkada, in Klitos II, in Kartier Sud south of Odeon, and Magoula Kefalariou in Argos, and the cemetery of Turla, located close to the site of Goules in Kozani, where one primary and one secondary cremation in amphora have been recorded. In terms of the type of grave goods, these are similar with the previous period, although less in number. This is partly due to the lack of associations between burned remains and objects for most of the collective tombs. No inferences on differentiations regarding cremation practices on the basis of sex and age can be made, since anthropological data for this period are very restricted, deriving mainly from communal assemblages in collective funerary contexts in Crete, with a long time span of use throughout the Bronze Age, rendering thus the association of the burned remains with a specific time period very difficult. During the late Bronze Age period, there are more numerous, if still proportionally rare, occurrences of cremation in the Aegean sphere, which are distributed more widely than the previous periods, from the Eastern Macedonia, east to the Strymon River, to Crete and the islands of South Aegean. Cremation, or the practice of partial burning of bones, is documented as early as the early late Bronze Age at Paleokastro on Chalkidiki Peninsula, where two inurned cremations have been deposited within a schist grave. During the late Helladic Minoan or Minoan 3A, 3B period, the use of fire has been reported in several funerary contexts, primarily from Macedonia, Thessaly, Central Greece, the Peloponnese, and Crete, while the number of cremations increases substantially from the late Helladic Minoan 3C period onwards, especially in Attica, the Peloponnese, and the islands of southern Aegean. In the earlier phases of the Bronze Age, evidence of fire concerned mostly the partial and low burning of or smoking of bones, probably after the complete decomposition of the flesh and soft tissue, deriving mainly from tholos and rock-cut chamber tombs. The burial enclosures at Fea Petra in East Macedonia, the tholos tombs in Kazanaki, Kapakli, and Ano Dranista in Volos, the chamber tombs 1 and X in Diras and Prosimna, respectively, Oxylithos and Katakalou in Euboea, the Tragana Tholos tomb and one chamber tomb from Kamilnaki, Loures on Rhodes, provide some good examples of this practice. On the other hand, definite secondary cremations deposited in urns have been documented in Fea Petra, in chamber tombs in Thebes, Brabron, Salamina, Prosimna, Karpathos, Lagada on Kos, in a built tomb at Archodiki on Psara, and on Carpathos. It is also worth mentioning the cremation burials at Olous or Elunda, which are among the oldest cremations on Crete, taking place mainly in Pithoi and more rarely in clay lanakes placed in rock crevices. This accumulation of urns represents an exceptional phenomenon for this period. Apart from the mentioned examples, the use of urns is not attested on the Greek mainland until the late Helladic 3C period. The cremation burials of the late Helladic or Minoan period can be divided into two broad groups in terms of the grave type or the cemeteries to which they belong, as well as the presence or absence of a cinerary urn. The first consists of cemeteries with a predominance of cremations. Kantsavelos plot in Argos and Myceni Chania have produced inert cremations in tumuli on the Greek mainland, while an additional example is known from Pezoulos Atsipades in Western Crete. Stone tumuli containing cremation urns have been also found at late Bronze Age Exochi and Potami in Drama, but they have not been dated precisely. The second group comprises cremations in traditional collective tomb cemeteries in which inhumations are predominant. The most famous examples are Perati in East Attica, with 18 cremations in total, either in a cinerary urn or placed on the floor of the chambers, and Elatia Alonaki in central Greece. Common custom in tombs of this category was to loosely deposit the cremated remains on the floor of the main chamber or in pits dug into the floors. Instances are known from Ialissos on Rhodes, Prignas Sidropylia on Crete, and Achaia Klaus in Patra. This practice was parallel to inert cremations. The latter appear to have been the exception rather the rule in context within inhumation-dominant tombs, remaining so far isolated cases in their respective cemeteries, including, for example, Tsiganadica on Thassos, Spaiareica Lusikon in Achaia, Ialissos on Rhodes, Lagada on Kos, and Thebes. Further examples have been documented in isolated chamber and tholos tombs from Crete and Athens. During the late Bronze Age, amphora, pithoi, and jugs are the most common urn shapes. Amphorae and amphoriski are widely distributed from the north to the south of the Aegean. The earliest use of amphora as an urn was documented in the early Bronze Age context at Paleokastron in Chalkidiki, and in the developed late Bronze Age enclosure at Phea Petra in Macedonia, while it becomes the most popular shape along with jugs in the Peloponnese and Attica during the late Helladic 3C period. Interestingly, pithoi and pithoid vessels are the most common types of urns during late Helladic Minoan 3A, 3B period, associated mainly with cremation from Crete. Other shapes, such as Pyxis, Oinohoi, and Hydria, appear only sporadically in certain regions and in small quantities. In general, the number of artifacts accompanying burnt bones increased in quantity and variety by the late Bronze Age. Drinking, serving, and storage vessels largely dominate the ceramic repertoire of cremation contexts throughout the period. In addition to vessels, we also find increased quantities of bronze, gold, and iron jewelry and ornaments, utensils, and accessories such as fibula and pits, as well as weapons deposited with the remains of the deceased, either inside or outside urns. The comparison of age and sex distribution across different aspects of the practice of compassion or partial bone burning does not reveal significant differentiations in the composition of the cremation context, which could be related to different funerary choices towards age or sex-based groups, and specifically different levels of application of associated practices. Besides a few subtle distinctions, neither age or sex was the critical factor in determining who was cremated and who was inhumed, or in the practices associated with the cremation ritual during the late Bronze Age. For the cremation contexts that have included skeletal analysis, it appears that all age categories and both sexes were cremated in equal numbers through time. Men and women were not distinguished by grave goods or urn shape. Perhaps the only distinctive differential treatment by sex during this period is seen in the custom of bone deposition in urns, which is related mainly to men, whereas the presence of cremations without urns seems to be associated mostly with women. Of course, more skeletal analysis of cremains could shed further light on cremation and sex dynamics. The first results from the synthetic study of the occurrence of heat-induced effects on human remains in the Aegean and the consideration of the new available data suggest that it was a complex phenomenon not limited to one type or region through time, appearing both in cremation-exclusive cemeteries and in isolated tombs within inhumation-dominant burial grounds, and in some cases in domestic contexts. The available evidence indicates that the practice of burning or cremating the deceased and the complex associated funerary rituals were highly regionalized and in some cases localized, reflecting thus the development and formation of different traditions based on regional preferences. There is enough evidence to suggest that the choices made at all stages of this process may have had a variety of different connotations in different parts of the Aegean and in different periods. Therefore, in order to explore the spatial and the temporal variation in the rite of burning, as well as to fully understand the entire complexity and the meaning behind related practices, it is necessary to consider the details regarding its layout and characteristics. Possible interpretations can be based only on detailed contextual examination, which would include the study of different data sets connected to the act of burning. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, Niki and Sophie, thank you very much. Now it's time for our last speaker. Sophie Cushman, when, where, and why the distribution of chamber tomb groups in the Argolith in chronological and local context. Sophie is a PhD candidate in classical archaeology in the Department of Ancient Greek and Roman Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. She studies Aegean prehistory with a focus on the Mycenaean period, mortuary archaeology, identity and ethnicity, and state formation. She has excavated on Crete and currently works as an excavation supervisor and ceramicist at the Sanctuary of Zeus at Nemea, the late Bronze Age cemetery of Idonia, and Petsa's house at Mycenae. She is currently the Milanas Shear Associate Fellow at the American School of Classical Studies at Athens, where she is conducting research for her doctoral dissertation, re-examining chamber tombs in the Argolith with a focus on non-palatial communities. The floor is yours, Sophie.
Thank you very much. I hope that you can see me and hear me and see my screen.
Yes, we see and hear.
Great, and thank you very much for the introduction and to all the organizers of the conference. I'm very sorry I can't be there in person due to fieldwork in Greece, but I appreciate all of the efforts to organize, and thanks to everyone for sticking around for this very last paper. So, with an estimated 4,000 examples known, rock-cut chamber tombs are by far the most common type of tomb in late Bronze Age Greece. As a result, the chamber tomb has become one of the symbols strongly associated with Mycenaean civilization, which flourished on the Greek mainland and other parts of the Aegean at this time. According to most traditional interpretations, the use of chamber tombs is very closely connected with the emergence of the Mycenaean palaces, especially in the Argolid, where at least 3 major centers have been identified at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Medea. Maureen Alden was the first to explicitly identify this connection, concluding that it seems impossible to deny the connection between palaces and the use of chamber tombs. In their seminal 1984 paper on the relationship between burial practices and social organization, Mee and Kavanagh reached a similar conclusion. More recently, James Wright has argued that many tombs cannot be dated earlier than LH382, and this is surely a consequence of the increasing reach of palace centers as they succeeded in consolidating control over adjacent areas. Perhaps the institution of chamber tomb cemeteries is partially a product of the implantation in some places of functionaries from the palace centers or the co-optation of local elites for that purpose, who in showing their allegiance to the urban center promoted a new style of burial. The problem with such interpretations is that they are inherently top-down and do not fully account for the agency of burying groups as they negotiated the mortuary process. Furthermore, most previous studies have focused primarily on assessing wealth as a measure of socioeconomic and political complexity, and thus any diversity in the mortuary record has been interpreted primarily in relation to a standard of sites which are perceived as the richest in terms of their material goods. Models which only address wealth, even if they account for the subjectivity of the concept, cannot account for the richness of embodied practice or the nuance of symbolism, which is especially potent in mortuary contexts. Finally, previous studies of chamber tombs in the Argolid have almost exclusively focused on the same limited number of cemeteries and on the Argive plain. On the one hand, this is partially a consequence of practicality, since these are the most well-excavated and well-published cemeteries. But on the other hand, it confirms our scholarly bias toward first and second-tier centers. We know of many smaller cemeteries, both within and outside the area, which have been rarely incorporated into regional analyses. The repeated focus on a few sites has resulted in a sort of echo chamber, where occasionally the data are considered from new theoretical perspectives, but rarely is the data itself critically reevaluated. My doctoral dissertation re-examines the evidence for chamber tomb use in the Argolid based on a more complete data set. I've adopted a broad regional definition, including the Fluvius Basin, the Nemea Valley, and the southern part of the Argolid, including the southern peninsula. But as we shall see, no chamber tombs are known in Methana or in the Argolic Acti, although I think this is probably due to the difficulty of identifying subterranean tombs in survey and the corresponding lack of systematic excavations of Bronze Age sites, which have been identified in these areas. I've compiled a catalog of 698 tombs and 86 cemeteries at 26 sites in the Argolid. These cemeteries can be defined as geographically distinct groups or clusters of tombs in areas used exclusively or primarily for the disposal of dead and associated burial rituals. In the remainder of this talk, I'll present the distribution of these cemeteries by starting period, discussing examples and context to show that the decision to establish a new burial ground can be considered both from the local perspective of the people using the tomb, as well as in relation to broader regional developments in burial practice and socio-political organization. I've cross-referenced the chronology of every cemetery based on the available evidence, and in many cases, I've been able to provide more specific information about the phases of use based on an analysis of published material, as well as in-person autopsy. Of the 86 cemeteries I've identified, 22 or 26% are not datable at all, either because they have not been excavated or more frequently because they have not been published. This leaves 64 cemeteries, or 74% of the sample, which are able to be dated with varying degrees of specificity or confidence. As many of us know, the nature of Mycenaean burial practices can make identifying phases of use difficult. I've devised a system for identifying starting period from more to less likely based on the context and quantity of datable material found in the tombs. When we look at the distribution of cemeteries by starting period, it is immediately clear that a majority were established before the beginning of the palatial period, that is before the end of LH2B, and we can see that clearly in this chart, and even more clearly in this one. Therefore, I argue that although the number of individual tombs did increase at several sites in LH3, it is difficult to support the traditional idea that chamber tombs represented a new style of burial to most communities in the Argolid. When we examine the distribution of chamber tombs by starting period in more detail, interesting and complex patterns emerge. Chamber tombs were constructed apparently at only 4 sites in LH1, including Prosimna, Kokla, Mycenae, and Idonia. In all cases, the number of tombs is small, 3 at Prosimna, 2 at Kokla, probably only 1 at Mycenae, and 1 or 2 at Idonia. The adoption of chamber tombs has been connected with broader changes in mortuary practices, which began already in the Middle Helladic period, and which have been summarized by Michael Boyd and others. In the Argolid, these developments are exemplified in the grave circles at Mycenae. But in comparison to the extraordinary wealth of the Mycenae shaft graves, the LH1 material from chamber tombs consists only of relatively small quantities of material, mostly pottery. Therefore, as Boyd has recently noted, the social strategies at play in chamber tombs are different from those in the shaft graves, probably because access to the wealth displayed in the grave circles was limited to a few groups at Mycenae at this time. In the Argolid, the use of chamber tombs was actually pioneered most intensely not at Mycenae, where only 1 out of 250 known tombs contained LH1 material, but at nearby Prosimna, where MH3 and LH1 material was found stratified with at least 5 primary burials and probably 3 secondary burials in 3 different tombs. The distribution of LH1 chamber tomb groups in the Argolid shows that limited but multiple individuals or burying groups throughout the region were willing and able to invest in a new tomb type that was probably adopted from the southern Peloponnese. Since chamber tombs are intended purposefully for multiple burial, their adoption represents a conscious and forward-thinking social strategy. At this early stage, in addition to signaling the importance of the deceased through sheer unprecedented form and scale, the adoption of the chamber tomb both reflected and asserted status through the suggestion that the deceased's social group, whether this was based on lineage, biological descent, kinship, or something else, would endure beyond their lifetime. This message would have been particularly potent, in my opinion, at the level of the local community or settlement, even as the adoption of new tomb types is in dialogue with the broader changes in mortuary practice mentioned just now. The potential success of the chamber tomb as a venue for this sort of symbolic display is demonstrated by its widespread adoption throughout the region in the following period. LH3A2 represents the peak starting period for chamber tomb cemeteries in the Argolid, with 23 cemeteries established at a total of 11 sites. 9 further groups were established at Prosimna, 4 were founded at Mycenae, and a second was created at Idonia. Chamber tombs were constructed for the first time at 6 additional sites in this period, including the cemetery at Dendra, associated with Medea, the Prophetess Ilia cemetery at Tiryns, 2 tomb groups at Argos, 1 at Asini, at least 1 at Nafplio, 1 at Aria just near Nafplio, and at least 1 at Polyepidavros. The number of new chamber tomb cemeteries in LH2A reflects the general model of increased participation in competitive conspicuous consumption in the mortuary sphere that has been described by other scholars, most notably Sophie Voutsaki. Previous studies focused on wealth have also led to the conclusion that the Eastern Argive plain was already dominant in this early period. However, when we examine the distribution of chamber tomb cemeteries, it is clear that communities at the edges and outside the plain were also participating in this phenomenon from an early period, as the evidence from Idonia and Epidavros in particular show. In fact, many early tombs at Idonia were quite wealthy, and the site may have been a rival to the emerging center at Mycenae, as both Shelton and Wright have previously suggested. The widespread adoption of chamber tombs in the Argolid and LH2A demonstrates the existence of a well-integrated regional communication network through which ideas and technologies circulated. However, the adoption of chamber tombs can also be understood in terms of developments at a more local level. For example, the tombs at Polyepidavros should be understood in relation to developments at the nearby regional sanctuary at the later site of the sanctuary of Apollo Maliatas, which exhibit strong Cretan and Cycladic connections from at least the LH1 period. Unfortunately, these tombs have not been fully published, but they did contain Cretan and Cycladic imports. It is clear that in this early period, multiple groups in this area were participating in extra-regional exchange networks that emphasize and chose to emphasize those connections in multiple and dynamic contexts, including in their burials. 8 cemeteries were established in LH2B, including 3 more at Mycenae, 2 more at Prosimna, 2 at Apathia near Galatas, and 1 at Berbati just west of Mycenae. On the one hand, the establishment of more cemeteries can be understood in terms of broader regional developments and burial practices, including the increased popularity of chamber tombs that we saw in the previous period. At the same time, it can also be contextualized in terms of more local events. For example, the chamber tombs at Apathia are the southernmost known in the region. Only limited information about the finds is so far available, but it seems that at least 1 tomb in the upper cemetery and 1 in the lower cemetery were constructed in LH2B, reflecting at least 2 different burial groups, which established themselves in opposition to each other through the construction of sepulchres cut in 2 different locations at this time. Furthermore, 2 nearby Tholos tombs at the site of Galatas Magula have been dated to MH3/LH1 and early LH2 respectively by the excavator. The earliest Tholos is architecturally similar to early and middle Bronze Age tholoi from Crete, while the second has its closest parallels in Messenia. The early date and architectural styles of these tholoi may suggest that in LH1 and early LH2, this part of the Peloponnese was oriented toward Crete and toward Messenia. But in LH2B, a third tholos was constructed at Galatas, this time built into the bedrock and similar in scale and construction to contemporary tholoi in the rest of the Argolid. The construction of an Argive-style tholos at Galatas and the construction of the first chamber tombs at Apathia in LH2B reflects the changing priorities, connections, and social strategies of the communities in this region as they reoriented themselves toward the central Argive plain. But this does not need to be understood as evidence that the emerging centers of the plain began to exert control over the area at this time, only rather that multiple and distinct burying groups in this area chose to adopt the mortuary vocabulary of tholoi and chamber tombs that was already well established by this time in the north. 6 further cemeteries were established sometime in LH2, including 5 at Mycenae and 1 at Penareti near Medea, but it is unfortunately impossible to be more specific about when in LH2 for these cemeteries. So it is clear from the above presentation of the data that a majority of chamber tomb cemeteries were established before the start of the palatial period throughout all areas of the Argolid for which we have funerary evidence of chamber tombs. This is a relatively simple conclusion, but one that has been obscured by previous studies which have only focused on the plain. However, new cemeteries did continue to be established in LH3. In the Argolid, LH3A1 probably represents the beginning of the palatial period, at least based on architecture from Mycenae and Tiryns, although the peak palatial period occurred in LH3A2 and 3B. In LH3A1, 14 new tomb groups were established, including 6 at Mycenae, 1 at Prosimna, a second at Berbati, a second at Asini, a second at Nafplio, and a third at Argos. Cemeteries were established for the first time at Monastiraki, southeast of Mycenae, at Skinokuri, and at Ayasotir in the Nemea Valley, which has been associated with the settlement at Sungiza. Only 3 new cemeteries, as far as we can tell from the evidence, were established in LH3A2, including 1 at Fictia, west of Mycenae, 1 at Verserka near Prosimna, and a single tomb at Varnavos in the Nemea Valley, also associated with Sungiza. 3 additional tomb groups were established sometime in LH3A, including another at Mycenae, a second at Fictia, and 1 near modern Kaveri. Only 1 cemetery seems to have been established in 3B1, this is at Zigoriez, and no cemeteries seem to have been established in 3B2 or 3C, although chamber tombs definitely continued to be used and constructed in these periods. 3 cemeteries can only be generally dated to LH3, another at Mycenae, 1 at Ligurio near Pidavros, and a second at Kaveri. So of the 24 total cemeteries, which were established for the first time in LH3, 13 were established at sites with existing chamber tomb groups, while 7 sites constructed new chamber tombs for the first time in this period. While the number of new cemeteries plateaued after LH3A1, as I mentioned, previous studies have found that the number of tombs increased at several sites. Chamber tombs are generally interpreted as family or kin sepulchres, so the existence of multiple multi-tomb cemeteries prior to the start of the palatial period therefore reflects a system of social organization based on kinship and family, as has been discussed by Vutsaki, Wright, and several others. It seems reasonable, therefore, that the construction of new tomb groups and new tombs at a site with previously existing cemeteries should be connected more with the emergence or increased articulation of groups at that site rather than as a symbol of palatial influence or control. In the palatial period, the continuity of cemeteries and the continued use of earlier tombs can be understood as reflecting persistent claims to resources, the ancestors, and the perpetuation of kinship lines, even in spite of the new socio-political situation. In fact, such claims probably took on amplified meaning at this time, and this is reflected in the intensification of secondary burial practices that is observed in many tombs in LH3, reflecting an emphasis on the communal identity of the kinship group, perhaps in response to the increased authority of the palaces. The increased number of tombs in this period, that is LH3, therefore represents an opening up of archaeologically visible burial to more groups within local communities, which had previously used chamber tombs somewhat more restrictively. Nikolaos has recently argued that the emergence of the palaces must have entailed structural transformations and reconfigurations rather than the imposition of essentially foreign systems. And I think that this idea also applies to burial practices. The increase in the number of tombs at existing cemeteries in LH3 can be understood as the physical articulation of social and corporate groups which existed previously, but which may have been institutionalized by the palace in this period. However, as this map shows, 8 sites did establish chamber tombs or seem to have established chamber tombs for the first time in the palatial period. We can see that these are spread throughout the region, although there is a cluster in the area around Mycenae, which is shown with a red star. According to previous interpretations, the establishment of new chamber tomb cemeteries in LH3 could symbolize the palatial annexation of these communities, which had previously maintained traditional forms of burial as a form of resistance against the emerging centers. However, I would like to suggest that it could also reflect a symbolic doubling down of claims to resources, both tangible and intangible, in response to the increased authority of the nearby citadels in the plain, as has been suggested for the LH3 cemeteries at Mycenae, which Kim Shelton has shown were often located close to physical natural resources, including rock quarries, clay beds, and water supplies. The well-known, if somewhat controversial, Sachs-Goldstein hypothesis argues that the creation of formalized cemeteries is one way in which communities organized by corporate groups may legitimize claims to resources through an emphasis on lineal descent. According to numerous anthropological and archaeological studies, the emergence of a dedicated area for the disposal of the dead is more likely to occur when the competition for resources is increased. The solidification of the palatial system in LH3 may have perpetrated conditions in which nearby communities felt their resources to be threatened, resulting in the adoption of these formalized chamber tomb cemeteries. In fact, several of the sites which built cemeteries for the first time in LH3 are also associated with important tangible resources, including highly arable land and natural perennial springs. At the same time, I think it is definitely possible that there are earlier tombs at all of these sites which remain unknown. None of the cemeteries except Hagia Sophia has been fully published, and only a few tombs at each site have been explored, primarily through rescue excavations. Since the actions of burying groups are inherently informed by the cultural contexts in which they are performed, it would be impossible to ignore the influence of the emerging centers Mycenae, Tiryns, and Medea on practices throughout the wider region over the course of the Late Bronze Age. At the same time, mortuary actions constitute social strategies, which in turn contribute to the shaping of social structure. The grave, as preserved in the archaeological record, represents the culmination of a complex series of decision-making processes. Through examining the mortuary evidence from a local perspective, we can potentially shed light on the ways in which communities responded to the increasing authority of emerging palatial centers through the particular social strategies they employed in their burial context. I have argued here that the chamber tomb was a pre-palatial phenomenon in the Argolid, which spread gradually, including throughout the palatial period, due to a number of factors, including, but not at all limited, to the emergence of these palatial centers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's time for questions and discussion. So are there any questions to Niki and Sebi?
May I ask, excuse me, may I ask a favor also with the consent of my colleagues? Because I need to pick up my son at 22. Can we start with any discussion or questions relating to the presentation I gave on behalf of also of Ioana, and if that is possible, and if my colleagues are not object to that?
No, of course.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, any questions?
Argiro, thank you so much for this paper.
Thank you, Sophie.
I mean, this is something that we were looking forward to having a series of absolute dates from the Tholos tubes, and of course the one that you showed us from Kyparisi. Do you find any, okay, it's difficult, but do you find any gaps in a series of absolute dates in single assemblages? Because this is a question that we always put on these long, this type of tubes. And of course, in order to be able to answer to this question, you need many samples to date. So I'm just, okay, I mean, I just wanted to say that, I mean, very welcome, your dates are very welcome really to into everything that you did for the Tholos tubes. I'm just wondering if you see any gaps.
Thank you, Sophie.
Chronological terms.
Thank you. As you were able to see, some of the dates, okay, for some of the three different contexts that we looked at, the Kyparisi cave tomb, and there was the Miamou, and also the two Tholos tombs from Monio Digitrias and Palekastro. So there were four different contexts. The dates that we got did not group all together. So there was a dispersal of dates along the range that we would expect to find. So there was no hiatus in terms of an absence, a silence in terms of the radiocarbon dates. Your point is very good, and it relates also to your and Niki's research and presentation, that you and we archaeologists need a very systematic sampling, and it is only us, the archaeologists, who can do that, rather than give a few samples to the specialists who do the radiocarbon dating or so on. We know the context, we know which context that we're interested in, like older, for instance, okay, so I don't speak without being specific. For instance, the Miamou Tholos tomb, they have like different rooms at Miamou. So the emphasis was to sample from all different rooms, from the area of the door, the inner space. So we tried to make the most of the sampling, to identify, to get any and map any chronological events. So this is basically how we can tackle problems like the problem that you described, of absence or silence in terms of our data. Always speaking about the absolute dating and the chronology, but generally speaking, as you also mentioned and Niki mentioned, that the context for us, the archaeological context, is vital, and that determines where we sample, where we study material from, and how we link our results and interpret those.
Thank you. Malcolm Winner, please.
Of course, the absolute dates will come down dramatically, as they have already with the publication of the annual resolution calibration curve in place of the decadal curve. And the article cited by Manning in 2010 is already completely out of date. But all of the dates cited now have come down a great deal.
Thank you very much for your comment. In this particular case, and this is what the Oxford team are trying to incorporate in the new models that they build, and how they build the calibration schemes. And the more data we have, obviously, should be taken into consideration, and it's going to affect. In this case, we're not so much concerned with the absolute dates, but rather the duration of use. And that was the principal aim, to show that these tholus tombs or cave tombs or the ossuaries at Palekasor, they are used for a long time, which has all the important social and connotations that we're interested in. Who are these people? Why they continue visit and revisit those places? How do they feel themselves? What is their identity? How they feel their identity? So,
indeed, but the length of time, of course, is relevant, and it's not a matter of what Oxford thinks, but what the international radiocarbon community thinks. And of course, it's already been published. The 2020 calibration curve is quite different from the 2013 calibration curve. You know, there are these traditional grave problems where you divide a sample, but one seed between two labs and get two completely different dates. You know, things have improved a great deal, but one has to stay up to date on this. And the dates cited are now recognized as much too early.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very fair point. And no, what I mentioned was really that the Oxford team, what they try to do is like always update their calibration systems. And by now, I think they're in version, I don't know, 13, 14. I always lose count of which version we're actually working on, but it all relates to what you said, the very important find that new data comes in and we need to take them into account. But yeah, thank you very much.
I should have begun by thanking you for a most interesting paper from which I learned a great deal.
Thank you. It's an honor.
My comments about dates shouldn't detract from that in any way.
No, I enjoy, yeah, and welcome any comments from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions to Argiro? I don't see, so thank you very much. And
thank
now questions to Niki and Sevi.
Yes, I have one.
Okay, so Giorgia, please.
Okay, thank you for interesting work about burned people. If I understood well, every burial in the late Atlantic 3B and 3C are inside a chamber tomb. No one a single grave of burned grave, cremation grave. This is one. And the second, about Achaia, if you have more information about the cremation burial, you know, there are one in Vudeni, one in Tolos of Kalitea Laganitia, and above all in tomb in the burial B of tomb Omicron in Kalitera Badania.
Yes. Yeah, I'm aware of that. I couldn't mention every single chamber tomb that has cremation, of course. Yes, but I'm aware of that. About woodeny, I have, let's say, a small, I don't know how to say that. I'm not quite sure, since this cremation, as far as I know, has not published, is not mentioned properly, okay, in details, even from Colonnas. Am I correct, if I remember well?
Yeah. But do you have some more information about Tomb Omicron?
About Tomb Omicron? Where?
Tomb Omicron of Kalitera Badania.
Yes, if I remember well, it is mentioned in the PhD thesis of the excavator, Kalithea is published, is a PhD thesis conducted at the University of Ioannina. Yeah, I don't remember the name of, yes. And still, even in this thesis, there are not so many details. If I remember well, sorry, because it's a bulk of information included in this study, so it's impossible to remember for each single chamber tomb or its context the full details of the cremation stuff.
You confirm there aren't a single grave, only inside the chamber tomb.
Yeah, I didn't hear that, sorry. Can you repeat?
Yes, you confirm that there isn't a single burial, a single cremated burial, only inside the chamber tombs, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Okay, so I have one comment and one question. So I will start with the comment. In the very, very last part, you were talking that neither gender nor the age or something like this was indicative for inhumation contra versus cremation. So do remember that there can be very, very many reasons why one or the other can be chosen, and just totally different area, different time and everything. But what we know from late Iron Age, that's actually a very obscure quote from Tacitus, who is saying that in northern Eastern Poland, they were actually keeping the bodies throughout the winter for cremation in the summer. So that can be like something which you are not really aware of, that will determine if you are choosing the inhumation or cremation, and sometimes can have nothing to do with the person themselves. So that's a comment. And so I don't expect you to answer that. And the question, you were talking for the Neolithic period. I hope I got it right, that there is more males in urns than other. And I was just wanted to get in detail. Is it more males than females, or more males from all the cremations in total? Because that will be also different, because it can be just that it's easier to determine the males in the urns. So that's a question.
Okay, thank you both for the comment and the question. First of all, I would like to clarify, but we are talking about tendencies. We have so many cremated remains, but it's just a small percentage of the material that has actually a proper, let's say, anthropological study. So its tendencies, we see some differentiation, but still, since you have many unstudied bones, or even because, of course, it's not always possible to estimate the sex from the cremated remains, we also have, even in the published and studied anthropological material, many indeterminate age, both age and sex individuals. So, and the question was, sorry.
The question was it more male than old, like if the majority of the cremation was male, or just there was more males than females?
The second one, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want, first I would like to emphasize that this is an extremely important project to look at cremation burials in this longue durée, which has never been done. This doesn't mean that it always means the same, but it's really important to keep in mind that we are really dealing with a very ancient tradition in Greece and probably also in other regions. Now, I guess that this is only the tip of the iceberg with cremation burials, although the image is not very good, because it's very telling that, to my knowledge, such cremation burials have never been found in settlements, which is probably due to the fact that they were not recognized. In settlements, they're extremely difficult to find unless they are inserted in urns, which may not be the case. By contrast, the Sophie early Neolithic evidence is so intriguing because during the early Neolithic in Southeastern Europe, there was such a strong tradition of intramural burials. And this is an extramural burial, which must be one of the earliest extramural burials in the Balkan Peninsula. And it's so strange that they did this with cremation burials that there would have been no problem in having these in the settlement. Strange.
Yes, it is strange, actually, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, if I may. Thank you for a very interesting presentation and project in general. I'm also interested in the Neolithic data. So you said that a high percentage of the age could not be identified. I don't know if you can. But could you identify a different percentage from adults to subadults? If you found any difference that you could identify different percentage of adults and subadults in the Neolithic?
Yes, actually we do, and I saw a graph with the age ranges we identify in this. Okay, I mentioned that there is a very special case in Touba, in Xeropigado Kyladas, but this is okay, during the Bronze, this is early Bronze Age, yes, of course, where you see that we have a predominance of sub-adults towards adults. But still, this material is under new examinations, skeletal examinations, so we'll see about that. So yes, we have different age categories, have both adults, sub-adults, but still, this is the problem I mentioned earlier, that since we have many cases of indeterminate individuals, we should be a little bit cautious in our, interpretation and our results. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Irene Högner is asking for.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, please.
Okay. So thank you for the very interesting talk. I'm very fascinated by the project, and I like the talk very much. So I have just one question. You might have commented also on this, and I might have not heard it. It's a very simple question. Did you look also into the combination of inhumation burials together with cremations, like on the contextual association between them, for example?
Yeah, that's an, let's say, information included on a database, whether our cremations are associated with inhumation, the presence of an inhumation or not within the context. So yes, we will have, in the future, we'll have data to discuss on.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. I think that will be very interesting also to look into that, because there might be reasons why people cremated individuals in order to combine them to other individuals which died later, kind of.
Yes, thank you.
Or thank you. Bye.
Yeah. I think we have to now ask questions to Sophie, who is waiting and waiting for her turn. Any questions to Sophie?
Yes, I have one.
Oh, yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. If understood well, there is a lack of evidence of Little Attic tree B2, I mean, no one cemeteries. But did you notice any changes in chamber tomb respect to other graves typologies, above all in Argolis?
Yes, so you are correct. As far as I can tell from the published material and material that I've been able to examine, no new cemeteries or tomb groups are founded in 3B2, but definitely tomb groups continue to be established. By this period in the Argolid, the Tholos tomb has already gone out of use, probably already in 3A1, everywhere except Mycenae. The chamber tomb is the dominant type of tomb, but cyst and pit graves and other type of subsymbol burials continue to be used in this period, including in the same cemeteries as chamber tombs. Does this answer the question?
Yes, above all, Little Attic 3B2 and 3C. More precisely, respect to the single grave or double grave, enchist grave?
This is a question that actually Professor Lewandowski can probably answer better than I can. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, so I'm not sure whether there is an increase or a decrease in these simple forms of graves in the palatial period, only that they definitely continue to be used throughout the late Bronze Age.
Okay. Thank you so much for your paper.
Okay, thank you. More questions to Sophie?
Since I have the microphone, can I ask you a question, Sophie? When it came to you showing the first chamber tomb in use at Mycenae, it's 518 in the Kalkani South Bank Cemetery. And that's the one with the alcove. And that's a kind of feature which isn't found at all later on in the South Bank Cemetery. And I was wondering whether you see any pattern in the architecture where people are kind of familiarizing themselves with how they want to use a chamber tomb, and whether it becomes a kind of more established pattern over time, or whether you'll always see kind of innovation and difference occurring throughout.
I think it's a combination of both. Interestingly, in many of the early examples, so the early chamber tombs at Persimna as well are quite large and have side chambers, whereas this is definitely not a feature that we see in most later tombs. So most tombs that are constructed for the first time in LH3 tends to be smaller and simpler with less architectural elaborations, but this doesn't mean that there isn't diversity in scale and other special features. And so this is something that's been connected to the palace, the emergence of the palace, that we see a decrease in the size of chamber tombs. I think that the palace probably played a role in this, but as I sort of hinted at, another argument that I'm making in my dissertation is that even as we see these changes in scale and maybe material wealth in the palatial period, there is not a corresponding decrease in the diversity of actual burial practices. And we see this most clearly, I think, in the treatment of the human remains in secondary burial pit and cysts.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions to Sophie? Okay, so thank you very much to all speakers and participants of this session. And now I'd like to ask Professor Joseph Maran to share with us his final remarks, impressions.
So we're at the end of this conference, and the organizers have entrusted me with the honorable task of giving the concluding remarks to this conference. And these were 2 intense days in which we listened to many stimulating papers and discussed posters. It all had in common, all these papers and posters had in common that they were presented by a group of gifted early career researchers. And I think the conference, the Warsaw Conference of this year, has impressively underlined the significance of the format of Sympozjum Egejskie, namely to provide early career researchers with the opportunity to present their ideas and to get into contact with peers and to discuss with them and with others. The establishment of Sympozjum Egejskie has filled a void in Aegean archaeology, because we do not have any other format that is explicitly dedicated to support early career researchers. And because in usual conferences, the number of presentations is limited, and so it is very difficult to be accepted to Aegeum conference and other venues. This is, of course, particularly unfortunate because it's so important to gain experience in presenting, and also to gain experience in formulating questions, which is also not that easy. This is my first participation in Sympozjum Egejskie, and I liked it very much. And I found it too that we had a space here in which I hope the young scholars had the possibility of presenting in a relatively stress-free atmosphere, and in the co-presence of peers who were in the similar situation, which makes things somewhat easier, I guess. Because it reduces the pressure and anxiety that naturally goes along with such first presentations, as perhaps in many of your cases was among the first presentations you gave. In closing, I would like to express my sincere gratitude, but also of the remaining participants, to the organizers, to Agata, Katarzyna, Kazimierz, and Stephanie for organizing the conference, and above all, or at the same level, for being such wonderful hosts. This was a most positive experience, and thank you so much for taking such good care of us in beautiful Warsaw. This will be a memorable conference for me. No discussions.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Joseph. Obviously, we've loved having you here. I now have to embark on the long list of thanks to everybody, obviously starting with thank you to the presenters, because we wouldn't have had much of a conference without all of the hard work that you've put in. So thank you very much indeed. Also, thank you to all of these people that we commandeered into volunteering to be our session chairs. We do like having our guest session chairs, so thank you for playing along with that. That was fantastic. They've had to run away in order to deal with essays and exams, but our two student volunteers, Olga Hartis and Monika Łapińska, obviously were fundamental to holding everything together over the last 2 days, so thank you to them. There's various behind the scenes people. So Eric, our IT officer, who was helping us to set up everything and dealing with all the various technical problems that have arisen over the last 2 days. The catering people, obviously we can't do this without the support of the faculty, and the university has chipped in order to make sure that this could all go ahead. So thank you to all of those people and organizations. Obviously, I also need to thank my fellow organizers as well for all the help that you've given over this, build up. Obviously, arranging a conference, it takes months and months of work. So thank you so much for all the time that you've dedicated, and the fact that you haven't killed me yet. I'm very appreciative of that too. So as I said, we were very honored to be joined by Professor Joseph Maran, who obviously gave this wonderful keynote lecture, but we're also very privileged to be joined by Sevasti Triantaphyllou, and the two of them have really played a major role in making sure that early career scholars are able to be pushed through and up into the established ranks of Aegean scholarship. And it's such an important role for senior scholars to play. So we'd like to give you a small appreciation of our thanks, Cassia, with a couple of back issues of our Sympozjum Egejskie volumes. But yeah. Yeah, okay, yours will be coming. Once I finish using them as props, okay? So first of all, just a reminder to all of our participants that if you require a certificate of participation, please do remember to email us and we'll send you a copy. Also, publication. So this will be published. Sympozjum Egejskie is a series. Yeah, hopefully you can see there on the camera, our first, our second, our third, and later this year there will be our fourth. So you'll be published in our 5th volume. We'll be sending out an email to everybody to explain all of the basic things, guidelines, deadlines once we've decided a deadline and all of that type of thing. But please, everybody, poster presenters and main presenters, you are all invited to contribute, and we would love to be receiving your submissions in future. Sympozjum Egejskie is obviously a way of showcasing what young scholars are able to do. It's also a way of us showcasing what you can do at the University of Warsaw. And so for those of you particularly who have come to Warsaw in person, but for, obviously those of you who have joined us only online and are intrigued by the possibility, we have a very nice doctoral program here now. We also have funding opportunities for people who are looking for a postdoc. And, this may sound like, a bit strange, but this is how I ended up at Warsaw, is because, basically I get to help filling all the Polish sections of the application form for me so that I was able to apply, and I only knew about it through Sympozjum Egejskie. So that is a real offer, a serious offer. Do consider us. And do also consider joining us again in 2 years' time, when it will be the 10th Sympozjum Egejskie, so a big number there, 2025. Yes, we hope obviously to make sure that the 10th is the biggest and the best, but I think that so far the 9th has been the best that we've had. So yeah, it's been a fantastic experience. So this brings the conference to a close. Thank you everybody who's joined us for the last couple of days online, and thank you for everybody who sat in this horrifically hot room for the last 2 days and have managed to survive the experience. So yes, thank you everybody, and I hope you all enjoyed yourselves.